Treatise 1 of Isaac of Nineveh, Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Isaac of Nineveh, Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence, by Isaac of Nineveh, translated by Arendt Jan Wensink. The fear of God is the foundation of excellence, for excellence is said to be the offspring of faith. It is sown in a man's heart when he allows his mind to confine the wandering impulses to continual meditation on the order of things to come, away from the distractions of the world. As to the foundation of excellence, the first among its particular elements is the concentration of the self. By freeing it from practical things, upon the enlightened word of the straight and holy ways, the word that by the inspired psalmist is called the teacher. There is scarcely to be found a man who is able to bear honors, or possibly such an one exists not, because man is very prone to err, even if he be an angel in his way. The foundation of the way of life consists in accustoming the mind to the words of God, and the practice of patience. For the draught provided by the former is helpful towards acquiring perfection in the latter, and further, increased development towards accomplishment in the latter will cause a heightened desire of the former, and the help provided by both of them will quickly bring about the rise of the whole building. No one is able to come near to God, save only he who is far from the world. For I do not call separation the departure from the body, but from the bodily things. Excellence consists therein that a man in his mind be a void as regards the world. As long as the senses are occupied with outward things, it is not possible for the heart to rest from imagining them. Nor do the affections cease, nor evil thoughts end except in the desert and the wilderness. While the soul has not yet become drunk by the faith in God, in that it has received an impression of its powers, the weakness of the senses cannot be healed, and it is not able to tread down with force visible matter, which is a screen before what is within, and not perceived by the senses. Reason is the cause of freedom, and the fruit of both liability to error. Without the first, the second cannot be, and where the second fails, there is the third bound, as it were, with halters. When grace is abundant in man, then the fear of death is despised on account of the love of righteousness. He finds many arguments in his soul, proving that it is becoming to bear troubles for the sake of the fear of God. And those things which are supposed to injure the body, and to repel nature unjustly, which consequently are of a nature to cause suffering, are reckoned in his eye as nothing in comparison with what is expected to be. And his mind convinces him firmly of the fact that it is not possible to recognize truth without gaining experience of the affections, and that God bestows great care upon man, and that he is not abandoned to chance, especially those who are trained in praying unto him, and who bear suffering for his sake. See these truths clearly, as if painted in colors, but when little faith takes root in our heart, then all these things are felt as contrary, not as serving for testing us, and that we are not always successful in trusting in God, and that God does not care for thee as it is supposed, is often insinuated by those who lay ambushes and shoot their arrows in the darkness. The foundation of man's true life is the fear of God, and this does not consent to dwell in the soul as long as there exists the distraction of outward things. For the heart, by the service of the senses, is turned away from the delight in God. The inward impulses are bound up in their sensible faculty, with the senses administering to them. The doubt of the heart introduces fear into the soul, but faith is able to make manly the mind, even under the cutting off of the limbs. As long as the love of the body is strong in thee, thou art not able to be courageous and without fear, because of the many adversaries that are constantly present in the neighborhood of him who is loved. If any one is fond of honor, he cannot be without causes of distress. There is no man whose mind suffers not likewise a change with things, in whatever respect it may be. If there is a second apperception of the senses, which generates and gives birth to desire, as Evagrius says, then those who dwell in doubt must keep silence, promising to preserve their mind in peace. Not that one is chaste from whom evil impulses that intend to combat him are withheld, but he whose uprightness of heart renders chaste the gaze of his mind, so that he does not audaciously enter into lascivious thoughts, and the saintliness of his heart is testified by the gaze of his pupils, which are guarded faithfully, so that bashfulness screens like a curtain the hidden place of his thoughts, so that his purity, like that of a chaste virgin, is faithfully guarded for Christ. There is nothing so apt to banish lascivious customs from the soul and to restrain inciting memories which quicken the wild flames in the body, as burning for the love of teachings, and prosecuting investigations concerning the meaning of the words of the Scriptures. When the impulses are immersed in delight, after having tasted the wisdom contained in the divine words, by means of the faculty that absorbs information from them, then every man will leave the body behind him. Forgetting the world and all that is in it, he will also banish from his soul all recollections on which are based the images of the material world. And often the soul in its thoughts during ecstasy will desist from the use of the wonted deliberations, natural practice by reason of the novel experiences which reach it from the sea of their mysteries. Even when the mind is floating on its upper waters, without being able to make its impulses deep as the depth of the waters, so that it can see all the treasures in its abysses. Still meditation, by its power of love, will have sufficient force to bind thoughts firmly together with thoughts of ecstasy, so that they are checked from thinking of and running after the nature of the body. As one of those who are clad with God said, "Because the heart is weak, it is not able to bear the evil influences that reach it from without, nor the struggle within. For you know that the evil thoughts of the body are strong, and if the heart is not accustomed to teachings, it is not possible to bear the troubled thoughts of the body. As the heaviness of the weight impedes the quick swaying to and fro of the tongue, of the balance in the wild winds, so bashfulness and fear impede the aberration of the mind, and that which is an indication of deficiency in the former is also a sign of the dominion of freedom in the latter. Just as in that case, any additional decrease is the cause of the scales swaying to and fro with greater ease, having no solid foundation, so in this case, by the abolition of fear from the soul on account of freedom, the balance of the mind is able to turn aside quickly. So the faculty of emotion comes in the consequence of freedom, and inconstancy of the mind is the consequence of the faculty of aberration. Be wise enough to lay a foundation for thy course in the way of God. In a few days it will bring thee before the gate of the kingdom, without windings in the way. Do not in the way of those who are educated by teachers look at the words which, in the way of test, are intended to elevate thy behavior, in order that thy soul may be elevated by the height of sight that is in them. Distinguish the purport of the word in all the stories that thou findest in the Scriptures, so that it may dwell with the great wisdom that is in the writings of enlightened men. Those who by grace are directed in their behavior towards illumination perceive constantly, as it were, an intelligible ray running between the words of the Scriptures. This ray distinguishes for the mind the simple speech from those things that are said in spiritual loftiness, in order to expand the soul. He who simply reads lofty words, his heart will also remain simple and devoid of the holy power that imparts to the heart a sweet taste by the meanings that stupefy the soul. All things are accustomed to move towards that which is akin to them, and the soul that possesses something of the Spirit, on hearing anything wherein a spiritual force is hidden, fervently embraces that which it hears, and yet a tale that is told spiritually, and wherein a great force is hidden, is not able to arouse everyone unto admiration. A word concerning excellence requires a heart free from the earth and earthly occupations. If a man's mind is beset with care for transitory things, tales concerning excellence will not incite his thought to the desiring of its possession. Solution from matter precedes the bonds in God, and though, as if by providence of grace, in some people the latter proceed from the former, so that love conquers love, in the usual order of providence, the common sequence is otherwise. So thou hast to keep the common order. If grace in thee comes first, it is for thy own sake. If it does not, then along the way that every man goes by tradition, ascend the spiritual ladder. Everything which is mentally performed, and the commandment of which is fulfilled thus also, is entirely invisible to the eyes of the flesh, whereas everything which is performed in practice is wholly of a composite nature, for it is only one commandment that necessitates these two, viz., theory and performance, because corporati and non-corporati, and the adaptation of the two belong to all. Therefore the enlightened intellect, as has been ordered formally by the blessed Moses, understands in a twofold way the commandment lying at the bottom of theory and practice. The simple as well as the complex is understood. Works performed carefully by the pure do not remove the impression of the recollection of previous reprehensible things, but they abolish in the mind the painful nature of recollection, so that what has passed through the mind often enough now becomes something excellent. The longing of the soul for the acquiring of excellence vanishes the desire of its partner for visible things. All things have their mean, lacking that even those things, the use of which is apt to help, may turn aside and become harmful without meeting any obstacle. If thou wishest to have mental communion with God by inquiring the impression of that delight that is not subject to the senses, then cling to mercy, for the holy beauty is formed by that clement within thee, which resembles mercy, and all the practices of mercy bring the soul immediately into communion with the unique splendor of the divine glory. Spiritual unification is a perpetual recollection that is vivid in the heart without variation, with burning love. By constancy in clinging to the commandments, it acquires the force to remain in union, and there is found, in a way neither secondary nor natural, matter for spiritual vision, in which the soul may confide absolutely. So a man is drawn towards ecstasy by the closing of the two classes of senses, those of the flesh and those of the soul. There is no other way towards spiritual love, which is modeler of invisible things, than to begin in the first place with mercy in accordance with the word of our Lord, who commands it to those who obey him, in connection with the perfection of the Father, the foundation. Very different is the word of practice from the words of beauty. Even without experience, wisdom knows how to adorn its words, and to speak the truth even without having any acquaintance with it, and to express itself concerning excellence without any experience of practical performance. A word proceeding from practice is a treasure to confide in, but idle wisdom is a pawn causing shame. It is as when an artist paints water on walls, without being able to quench his thirst by it, or as a man who dreams beautiful dreams. He who from practical experience speaks about excellence brings the word to his hearers, as it were, from the capital won by his own commerce, and, as from the stock of his soul, sows his teachings in the ears of his audience. He opens his mouth freely before his spiritual sons, in the manner of old Jacob before chaste Joseph, saying, I have given thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with the sword and with my bow. So every man whose behavior is stained will love temporal life. So will also he who falls short of knowledge. Someone has well said, the fear of death distresses a fleshly man, but he who has a good witness in himself will desire it as life. Do not reckon as a truly wise man that one whose mind is subject to fear on account of temporal life. All good and evil things which befall the body have all of them to be reckoned by thee as dreams, which thou canst escape from not only by death, but which often leave thee even before death and disappear. If thy soul is bound to some of them, then estimate them as thy possession forever, accompanying thee also in the world to be. If they are beautiful, then rejoice and thank God in thy mind. If they are evil, then be sorry and sigh and seek to be delivered from them while being in the body. If any good is done to thee, open or concealed, then be sure that thy mediators concerning it have been baptism and faith, by which thou wert called in Jesus Christ unto good works, to whom and to the Father and to the Holy Ghost belong praise, honor, and adoration, now and always and forever and ever. Amen. End of Treatise 1. Treatise 2 of Mystic Treatises. 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence by Isaac of Nineveh. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Gratefulness on the part of the recipient spurs on the giver to bestow gifts larger than before. He who embezzles petty things is also false and fraudulent concerning things of importance. The sick one who is acquainted with his sickness is easily to be cured, and he who confesses his pain is near to health. Many are the pains of the hard heart, and when the sick one resists the physician, his torments will be augmented. There is no sin which cannot be pardoned, except one which lacks repentance. And there is no gift which is not augmented, save that which remains without acknowledgement. For the portion of the fool is small in his eyes. Think constantly of those who are superior to thee in excellence, so thou mayest see thyself at all times as being less than they are. And be aware at all times of heavy troubles, of those whose vexations are difficult and serious, so that thou mayest become grateful for the small ones found with thyself, that thou mayest be able to bear them with joy. When thou art in a state of subjection, and languid and dejected, and thou art bound and fettered before thy foe, in mournful wretchedness, and laborious service of sin, then recall to thy mind the previous times of firmness, how thou showest painstaking even concerning little things, and how thou wert moved with zeal against the obstructors in thy course, how thou utterest sighs on account of the small things, which were despised by thee as accidental, and thy whole person was winding a wreath of victory over these things. Then by these and similar recollections thy soul will be aroused as from the depth, and be clad with the flame of zeal, and it will rise from its immersion as if from the dead, and stretch itself and return to its former state, in hot strife against Satan and sin. Recollect the fall of the strong, that thou mayest remain humble under thy virtues, and think of the heavy sins of those who fell and repented, and of the praise and honor they received afterwards, so that thou mayest acquire courage during thy repentance. Be a persecutor of thyself, then thy foe will be driven away from thee. Be on peaceful terms with thy soul, then heaven and earth will be on peaceful terms with thee. Be zealous to enter the treasury within thee, then thou wilt see that which is in heaven, for the former and the latter are one, and entering thou wilt see both. The ladder upon the kingdom is hidden within thee, and within thy soul. Dive into thyself, freed from sin, and there thou wilt find steps, along which thou canst ascend. What the things of the world are to be, the Scriptures do not explain. How we may acquire the faculty to perceive their delight even now, without change of nature or local transition, they teach us plainly. Though they call these things by beloved names of glorious things, which are delightful and esteemed by us, in order to spur us on, still by saying that the eye has not seen, nor the ear heard, and so on, they show us that the things to be are not equal to any of the things present, by their being incomprehensible. They have to be reckoned by us as giving us even now spiritual delight, not the enjoyment of those things in themselves, such as are found outside the being of receivers, and promised us for a future state. Otherwise the kingdom of God is within you, and thy kingdom come, would teach us that we possess within us a pledge of the delight which is in those things. For it is necessary that there be a resemblance between these and the pledge, partial for the present though it be, yet to be complete in the future. Again, the word, as through a glass, shows us the comparability anyhow. Even if they are not one in essence, if now, according to the trustworthy testimonies of the commentators of the Scriptures, this is due to an intelligible influence of the Holy Ghost, and is a part of that total one, then apart from the spiritual influence that by intelligible apprehension forms a communication between the Holy Ghost and those who are influenced. The delight of the saints in the world is not occasioned by any sensible mediator, be it senses or sense organs, save only the wombs which contain all in defined order, which we may call the profusion of light, though not the intelligible profusion. A friend of excellence is he who zealously practices beautiful things, but who gladly accepts the evil things adhering to him. Patiently to bear troubles for the sake of excellence is not so great as this, that through the determination of the good will, the mind be not confused by the allurements of exciting things. For repentance which comes after the taking away of freedom never can be a source of joy, nor can it be reckoned as a redemption of those who rule. Protect the sinner without doing him wrong, but strengthen his courage for life. Then the mercy of the Lord will bear thee. Support with thy word the weak and distressed in spirit, whenever thou canst. Then the hand that bears the universe will support thee. Participate with those who are suffering in heart, in passionate prayer and mourning of heart. Then before thy demand a fountain of grace will be opened. Be strenuous in prayer at all time before God, with a heart full of chaste deliberations mingled with passion. Then he will preserve thy mind from impure thoughts, so that the way of God be not disordered in thee. Occupy thy gaze with constant intercourse, with intelligent recitation of the Scriptures, lest on account of idleness the sight of foreign objects defile thy look. Do not tempt thy mind, for the sake of examination, by consideration of impure seductive thoughts, thinking that thou shalt not be vanquished. Even wise men have been perturbed in this place and deviated. Do not take fire in thy bosom, as hath been said. Without severe bodily trouble, it is hard for the untrained youth to be bound under the yoke of saintliness. The sign of the beginning of darkness of mind manifests itself in the soul by dejection, in the first place with regard to service and prayer. For it is not possible that the way in thy soul towards error should be opened if thou hast not fallen in this point first. Then, being bereft of God's help, which affords a way unto him, thou wilt easily fall into the hands of the foes. And further, being without care for the matters of excellence, thou wilt be carried towards the contrary things in every manner. Departing from any side is the beginning of approaching to the opposite one. Let the service of excellence be firm in thy soul, meditate on it, and so on. Show thy weakness before God at all times, lest stranger come to examine thy strength, while thou art separated from thy helper. The service of the cross is a double one, and this is in accordance with its twofold nature, which is divided into two parts: patience in face of bodily troubles, which is accomplished through the instrumentality of the anger of the soul. This is called practice. And the subtle intellectual service, in intercourse with God, constant prayer, and so on, which is performed with the desiring part, and called theory. The one purifies the affectable part by the strength of zeal, the other clears the intellectual part by the influence of the love of the soul, which is the natural appetite. Every one who, before being trained on the former part, passes to the latter, on account of the pleasures it affords, desiring, or rather negligently, causes God's anger to blow against him, because, having mortified his members on the earth, i.e., before healing the illness of his deliberations, by endurance under the labors and the shame of the cross, he has dared to occupy his mind with the glory of the cross. This is what has been said by the ancient saints. If the mind desires to ascend the cross before the senses have become silent on account of weakness, the anger of God will strike it. By the fact of the ascension of the cross causing anger, he does not point to the first part, namely the bearing of troubles patiently, which is the crucifying of the body, but to the theoretical ascension which is the second part, and which is truly subsequent to the healing of the soul. For he who hastens to meditate with his heart vain imaginations concerning future things, while his mind is still stained by reprehensible passions, will be reduced to silence on his way by punishment, because, before having purified his mind by means of trials met in subduing the carnal desires, on account of what he has heard and read merely, he has hastened headlong to tread a path full of darkness, being blind, a way which exposes to danger day and night even those whose sight is sound and full of light, and who possess grace as their guide, while their eyes are full of tears, and with prayer and weeping they convert night into day, on account of the danger of the course and the hard rocks they meet, and the phantoms of sham truth that are frequently found on the way among those who pretend to be true. For divine things present themselves spontaneously without thy perceiving them, if the place of the heart be pure and undefiled. If the small pupil of thy soul has not been purified, do not venture to look at the globe of the sun, lest thou be bereft even of the usual sight, which is simple faith and humbleness and confession of the heart, and light service in accordance with thy power, and thou be cast into one of the intelligible places, which is the darkness without God, like him who ventured to go to the meal in sordid habits. From labor and watchfulness springs purity of deliberations, and from purity of deliberations inward light. And from here the mind is guided by grace towards that which it is not allowed to the senses either to teach or to learn. Let excellence be reckoned by thee as the body, contemplation as the soul. The two form one complete spiritual man, composed of sensible and intelligible parts. And as it is not possible that the soul reach existence and birth without the accomplished formation of the body, so it is not possible that contemplation, the second soul, the spirit of revelations, be formed in the womb of the intellect, which receives the fullness of spiritual seed, without the corporeal performance of excellence, the dwelling place of the knowledge which receives revelations. Contemplation is the apprehension of the divine mysteries, which are hidden in the things spoken. When thou hearest of being far from the world, of leaving the world, of being pure from the world, thou art first in need of learning and knowing, not after the fashion of a novice, but with the impulses of gnosis. What the term world means, how many different meanings the word conveys, then thou wilt be able thyself to know, and how far thou art distant from or connected with the world. If a man know not first what the world is, he cannot understand with how many limbs he is bound to or far from it. There are many who think themselves wholly devoid of the world in their behavior, because on 2 or 3 points they refrain from it. This is because they have not understood nor perceived with discernment that they are dead to the world in 1 or 2 limbs, while others are living in the body of the world. Therefore, they even cannot perceive their affections, and because they do not perceive them, they are not anxious to be cured from them. The world is said by speculative examination to be the extension of a common name unto distinct affections. If we wish to call the affections by a common name, we call them world. If we mention the affections separately, we call them by their separate names. The affections are parts of the usual current of the world. Where they have ceased, there the world's current has ceased. They are love of riches, gathering of possessions, fatness of the body, giving rise to the tendency towards carnal desire, love of honor, which is the source of envy, exercising government, pride and haughtiness of magistracy, folly, glory among men, which is the cause of choler, bodily fear. Where their current has been dammed, there the world, after their example, has to some extent ceased to be maintained and to exist. Yet in the same way as some of the saints, who though being alive yet are dead, for they are alive bodily, but they do not live carnally. See in which of those thou art alive. Then thou shalt know in how many parts thou art living to the world, and in how many thou art dead. When thou hast learned what the world is, thou wilt be instructed in these distinctions, and also concerning thy being bound to the world, or thy being free from it. In short, the world is bodily behavior and carnal thoughts. For the overcoming of the world is also to be recognized in these two, viz., from the change of behavior and from the alteration of the impulses. From the impulses of thy mind to the things towards which its impulses go astray, thou canst understand the measure of thy behavior, viz., to which things thy nature turns without labor, which are the constant inclinations, and which are those set into motion fortuitously, whether the mind is the agent for the apprehension of incorporeal impulses only, or whether it works wholly through matter, whether this materially is an affected state, or whether the impulses are but the stamps of the mind's service to the body, so that the mind, not of its own will, is hallucinating concerning these faculties, by which it performs virtues, and from which in a sound state it derives its motive for fervor and concentration of thought, so that the mind can act corporeally, even with the loftiest aim, because of its lack of experience, even though it be in no affected state, and whether the mind is not distressed by the unseen touch of the stamps of the imaginations, in view of its excessive radiance in God, which is wont to cut off vain recollections. The short descriptions of this chapter are sufficient for a man's illumination, if he be quiet and intelligent, and they outweigh many books. Bodily fear is strong in man, so strong that it often withholds him from praiseworthy and honorable things. But when it is face to face with psychic fear, it is absorbed by it as coldness by the force of a flame. End of Treatise 2.
Treatise 3 of Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence, by Isaac of Nineveh, translated by Arndt Jan Wensick. Treatise 3. The soul whose nature is not greatly solicitous for the gathering of possessions does not require great diligence in order to find within itself impulses of wisdom unto God. For freedom from connection with the world will naturally set in motion flashes of intuition from which it can exalt itself unto God and remain in ecstasy. When the waters from without do not enter the fountain of the soul, its natural waters will arise, namely, the wonderful intuitions which are moving towards God at all time. As often as the soul is found not to be in this state, it has either found a starting point in foreign recollections, or the senses have caused it to be troubled by the touch of outward things, when the senses have been fenced in by solitude without a break, and recollections have grown dim by its healthful influence. Then thou wilt see what the nature of the deliberations of the soul, and what the nature of the soul is, and what treasures are collected in it. These treasures are incorporeal intuitions, which arise from the soul, without care or labor being spent on them. Nay, a man does not even know that such deliberations could arise in human nature, nor does he know who was his teacher, or how he has found that which he cannot describe to his companion, or who has been his guide towards that which he has not learned from another. This is the nature of the soul. So the affections are additions, entering the soul on account of certain causes, but naturally the soul is not affectable. When thou findest psychic or corporeal affections here or there in the Scriptures, such things are said concerning those causes, but the soul naturally has no affections. But the philosophers who are without do not believe this, neither do those who are their followers. But we believe that God has not made his image affectable. With his image I do not mean the body, but the soul which is invisible. Every image is a copy in which the prototype is depicted, and a visible image cannot be the copy of something invisible. So we believe that the affections of the soul are not natural as they say. If anyone likes to dispute concerning this point, we will ask him, what is natural to the soul? To be without affections, full of light, or moved by the affections and dark? Now, if the nature of the soul is to be clear and a receptacle of the blessed light, It will be found in this condition when it returns unto its natural state. But when it is moved by the affections, all the members of the Church confess it to have abandoned its nature. Consequently, the affections are later extensions to the nature of the soul. And it is not at all becoming to think the affections to be psychic. If the soul be moved by them, nevertheless it is clear that it is moved by something outside it, not by what is its own. And if these affections are thought to be natural, because the soul is moved by them through the intermediary cause of the body, then hunger, thirst, and sleep would also be natural to the soul, because it is affected and brought to rest by them along with the body. And this would also be true for the amputation of limbs, fever, pains, illnesses, and so on, by which the body is affected because of its connection with the soul, and the soul because of its connection with the body, being affected with joy because of bodily experiences, and receiving distress along with the torments of the body. What is natural to the soul, what is external to, and what is above its nature? Natural to the soul is the understanding of all created things, sensible and intelligible. Above its nature, its being moved by divine contemplation. External to its nature, its being excited emotionally by the affections. Also the light of the world, the victorious Basilius says thus: when the soul is in its natural order, it is found above. When it has abandoned its nature, it is found beneath and on the earth. There are no affections above, where also the place of the soul is said to be. But when its nature abandons its order, it becomes affectable. Where then are the affections of the soul, now that it appears that they do not belong to its nature? It is clear that the soul is moved by the reprehensible affections which are in the body, as also it is moved by hunger and thirst on account of the body. But because there are no laws concerning these, the soul is not reprehensible on account of them. Just as sometimes a man is ordered by God to do those things which are blameworthy, and he receives, instead of blame and reprehension, good reward, as Hosea the prophet, who contracted an unlawful marriage, and as Elijah, who committed slaughter in his zeal for God, and as those who on Moses' order stabbed with swords their kindred. But it is said that, apart from what belongs to the nature of the body, the soul has also that which belongs to its nature, namely, anger and choler, and these are its passions. Second question. We ask, when the desire of the soul is kindled to a flame by divine things, does this belong to its nature, or rather when it is set upon earthly and bodily things? And when it is said that the nature of the soul is on fire for the sake of those things which excite its zeal, is then this passion natural when it goes hand in hand with bodily desire, envy, glory, and so on, or when it goes in the direction opposite to them? We shall answer the disputed question, and we too shall inquire into it. The Holy Writ says many things allegorically, and often it uses metaphorical terms. Many times it applies to the soul that which belongs to the body, and to the body that which belongs to the soul, without distinguishing between the two, for the sake of succinctness. Now the intelligent understand what they read, namely, the aim of Scripture. In the things related to the divinity of our Lord, for instance, in a high and elevated way, applies to his humanity that which does not suit human nature, and to his divinity what does not suit it. And many who do not understand the aim of the language of Scripture have stumbled here so that they never could rise again. So it is also with the things which concern soul and body. If excellence is the natural health of the soul, the affections, however, ailments accustomed to oppress it and to bereave it of its health, it is clear that health is prior in nature to accidental illnesses. And if this be so, as it is indeed true, then excellence necessarily must be natural to the soul, and the accidental external to its nature, for it is not possible that what is prior should not be natural. Third question. The affections of the body, are they naturally inherent in it, or of a secondary nature? And those which affect the soul by the intermediary of the body, are they secondary or natural? To call those of the body not natural is impossible. As to the soul, because it is known and universally confessed that purity belongs to its nature, no one will venture in view of this fact to maintain that it is primarily affectable. For it is generally conceded that ailment is secondary to health, and it is not possible that one and the same things should be a good and an evil nature. One of the two, in any case, must be the prior of the other, and that which is the older one is also the natural. Whatever is accidental cannot be said to be natural and essential, but it is an eruption from without. And all accident and obtrusion is connected, whenever it be, with variation and change. Nature, however, does not change or vary. All existing affections are given to be a help to each of the natures to which they naturally belong, and for the growth of which they are given by God. The bodily affections are placed by God in the body for the sake of profit and growth of the body, and the psychic affections, for example, the psychic powers, for the sake of the growth and profit of the soul. And when the body is compelled to desist from its affectible nature, by withdrawing from the affections, and to follow the nature of the soul, it is injured. And when the soul leaves its own nature and follows that of the body, it is injured. Because, according to the word of the Apostle, the spirit desires that which harms the body, and the body desires that which harms the spirit. And these two are naturally opposites to one another. Therefore, no one shall abuse God because he has implanted in our nature affections and sins. For when he set in order each nature, he implanted in it that which gives it growth. But if one connects itself with the other, it is no longer in its own domain, but in a foreign one. If these affections naturally belong to the soul, why then should the soul be injured when using them? For that which is the property of nature does not injure it. And how is it that the accomplishment of the bodily affections is profitable and helpful to the body, whereas those of the soul injure the soul if they belong to it? And why should, if this be true, excellence torment the body, but be beneficial unto the soul? Thou seest how what is external to their nature injures every one of these natures. For every one of these natures exults when it is near to what is its own. If thou art desirous to know what are the properties of every one of these natures, thou must observe that its properties are those things, by the use of what it profits. And if it is tormented by the use of any of these things, then know that it is influenced by what is not its property. We conclude, if it is known that the affections of every one of these natures are each other's opposites, then consequently all that gives profit and rest to the body when used by the soul has not to be reckoned as belonging to the soul. Because what is natural to the soul is fatal to the body, except those things which are connected with the soul in some secondary way. Because of the weakness of the flesh, the soul cannot absolutely be freed from them, as long as it is clad with the flesh. For its nature is connected with the troubles of the flesh because of the union of its impulses with the carnal senses, with which they are interwoven by the inscrutable wisdom. And though intermingled in this way, nevertheless, impulses are distinguished from impulses, and will from will, namely, the carnal from the spiritual one. And nature is not at all composite, nor does it disavow what is its property. And though man renders the impulses in a high degree equal to each other, by sin or by excellence, at certain times every one exerts its will and shows its power. But when bodily thoughts have to some extent been lifted up, then their impulses manifest themselves wholly in the spiritual sphere, swimming in the heart of heaven with incomprehensible things. But even then the body cannot remain without some memory of what its own is, even as, when the impulses are in the domain of sin, the beautiful emotions of the soul are not brought to silence in the mind. What is purity of mind? Not that one who does not know evil things is pure of mind, that were to be a brute, nor do we call pure of mind those whom nature has placed in the age of boyhood, that were to postulate that man should not belong to the class of created beings. But purity of mind consists in being captivated by divine things, a state that is only reached when many virtues have been practiced. We do not venture to say that he that has reached it has acquired it without the experience of contrary deliberations, else he would not be clad with a body. For we do not think that before the world to be, nature can be purged from contrary inclinations. The temptation of the deliberations is not, in my opinion, this, that one surrenders to them, but the beginning of the struggle within the deliberations, which begins in the mind on account of the 4 kinds of bases, which are the root of movement to all kinds of affections. So that in this life there is not found any one exalted above earthly recollections, even if he belong to the masters of the battle, and, like Paul, be reputed perfect. But while the body by means of its impulses, in accordance with the order of nature, and the world by its natures through the intermediation of the senses, and the soul by deliberations, recollections, and powers of deviation, and the demons by the cooperating forces of the things mentioned, while the power of these 4-fold affections is experienced by him, he will be troubled to a small degree only, and be drawn towards the excellent things which are seen by intuition. Decide thou whether it is possible that one of these 4 be annihilated before the annihilation of the world, or by the transition that takes place at death, or whether the body can elevate itself wholly above its needs, without nature's urging to seek any of the worldly things. If now this is deemed absurd, so long as these 4 powers exist, it is necessary that also the affections move themselves in all beings clad with a body, and consequently caution must be practiced by every one. By the affections I do not understand 1 or 2, but all the different ones which occur in those clad with flesh. But if a man should venture to say that he experiences only weak impulses and harmless strife, we would say that, whoever such people may be, they do not require works but great watchfulness. What is the difference between purity of mind and purity of heart? Purity of mind is something other than purity of heart, just as there is a difference between one of the members of the whole body and the whole body. The mind is one of the senses of the soul. The heart is the central organ of the inward senses. This means the sense of senses, because it is the root. And if the root is holy, so also are all the branches. But this is not so if it is holy in one of the branches only. Now, with but little acquaintance with the Scriptures, and a little exercise in fasting and solitude, the mind forgets its former occupation and is cleansed, while it refrains from foreign habits, but is also easily defiled. The heart is purified through great trouble, and by being deprived of all association with the world, together with a complete mortification in every point. And when it has been purified, its purity is not defiled by the touch of insignificant worldly things. This means it has no fear even before severe struggles, for it possesses a sound stomach that easily digests all sorts of food, which are difficult for others who are sick in their interior. For the physicians say, all meat which is difficult of digestion increases the forces of the sound body, because it is taken up by a strong stomach. In the same way, every purification that is brought about easily, in a short time and by small labors, is easily defiled again. But the purity that is acquired through great troubles, and after a long time by the highest part of the soul, is not endangered by insignificant touches of the worldly things. Quiet senses give birth to peace in the soul, because they do not allow it to experience strife. But since the soul has no sensation of anything, it is a victory without struggle. But when it becomes negligent, it is not able to remain steadfast. And when it strives to get rid of apprehension, after the latter got extension, the soul destroys its previous properties, namely, serenity and natural perfection. For the majority of men, and possibly the whole world, leave their first state on account of this cause. Only one out of many returns to its first place when he has once adopted the second habit. Much better is simplicity than the different kinds of forgiveness. Human nature needs fear in order to guard against the borders of the commandments being crossed. It needs love to excite the desire of good things, for the sake of which man hastens to perform beautiful things. Spiritual knowledge is posterior to the performance of excellence. Prior to both are love and fear is prior to love. Everyone who ventures to acquire the latter things before the former undoubtedly lays a perishable foundation in his soul, for they are placed by God in such an order that these proceed from those. Do not interchange the love of thy neighbor with the love of worldly things, for that which is precious above all things is hidden in it. A material object which is a mark for the eyes of the flesh is also of such a nature as to affect the hidden visual powers, and the affections which cloud the second natural contemplation acts in the same manner for the natural steadfastness. They are related to one another in the same way, up to where ceases the current of all kinds of contemplation. When the mind is in a state of natural steadfastness, it is in angelic contemplation, which is the first and natural contemplation, which is also named naked mind. When the mind is in the second state of natural knowledge, it sucks and is sustained by the milk from the corporeal breasts. This state is called the last garment of the aforementioned state. It is placed after the state of purity, which the mind enters first. It is prior in being, for it is the first stage of knowledge, although posterior in honor. On this account, therefore, it is also called the second one, as also on account of the indications of some of the tokens by which the mind is purified and trained for the ascent to the second order, which is the perfection of intellectual impulses and the stage which is near divine contemplation. The last garment of the mind are the senses. Its state of nakedness is its being moved by kinds of non-material contemplation. Leave the small things in order to find the honored ones. Be dead in life, then thou wilt not live in death. Let thyself die in integrity, but not live in guiltiness. Not only those who suffer death for the sake of the faith in Christ are martyrs, but also those who die for the sake of keeping his commandments. Be not inept in thy petitions, lest thou grieve God by thy ignorance. Learn to pray with prudence, that thou mayest be esteemed worthy of glorious things. Seek well-esteemed things from him who does not withhold. Then thou wilt receive honor from him, because of the choice of thy wise will. Solomon sought wisdom, and he received, apart from it, the earthly kingdom, because he knew how to ask wisely, namely, great things from the king. Elisha sought 1 or 2 parts of the Spirit that was upon his master, and his request was not withheld from him. The honor of the king is lessened by him who seeks contemptible things. Israel sought despicable things. It gained the anger of God. It neglected to wonder at the workings and terrible effects of his deeds, and it sought the desires of its belly. And while their food was still in their mouth, the anger of God reached them. Present thy requests unto God in accordance with his glorious being, in order that thy honor be great in his eyes, and he rejoice in thee. When a man seeks from a king a measure full of dung, he will not only be despised on account of his despicable request, exposing his ignorance, but he also insults the king by his insipid demand. Such also is he who in prayer asks corporeal things from God. Lo, the angels and the archangels, which are the chiefs of the angels, look at thee in the time of prayer, in order to know which prayer thou wilt present unto their Lord. And they wonder at thee when they see the corporeal one leaving his dunghill and asking heavenly things. Do not seek from God that which he is anxious to give us, even if we do not beg for it, which he withholds not from his housemates, and not even from those who are wholly foreign to the knowledge of him, nay, who do not even know that he is. Use not vain repetitions, as the heathens do. What is this, as the heathen? The corporeal things are sought by the peoples of the earth, but give ye no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For your Father knoweth that ye also have need of all these things. A son does not ask bread from his father, but makes supplication concerning the great portions in store for him in the house of his father. That which our Lord has commanded concerning daily bread, namely, that we pray for it, is a petition which he handed down to the common people because of the weakness of their minds. Regard that which he commands to those who are perfect in knowledge and sound of soul, namely, ye shall not take thought of food or raiment. If your Father bestows care upon the fowls that have no soul, how much more upon you? But ask from God the kingdom and righteousness, then he will add these things too. If he is slow in granting thy request, when thou askest without receiving promptly, then be not distressed, for thou art not wiser than God. When thou remainest as thou art, it is either because thy behavior does not agree with thy request, or because the ways of thy heart diverge from the aim of thy prayer, or because thy inner state is childish in comparison with the greatness of the thing. It is not becoming that great things should fall into our hands easily, lest the gift of God should be thought to be mean because of its being acquired without difficulty. All that is acquired with labor is guarded with caution. Thirst after Jesus, then he will satisfy thee with his love. Shut thy eyes to the precious things of the world, then thou wilt be deemed worthy of a peace given by God to reign in thy heart. Restrain thyself from the allurements which are shining for thy eyes, then thou wilt be deemed worthy of spiritual joy. If thy behavior is not worthy of God, do not ask from him praised things, lest thou appear as a man who tries God. Prayer accords strictly with behavior. No man desires heavenly things as long as he is bound with ties impeding his will on account of the body, and no man asks divine things while he is occupied with earthly things. The desire of every man is known from his works, and that which he cares for he will be anxious to seek in prayer. He will be zealous in showing by his outward deeds that which he asks for in prayer. He who desires great things has no intercourse with mean ones. Be free even while thou art bound in the body, and show submission in thy freedom for the sake of Christ, and be wise in thy innocence, lest thou be beguiled. Love humility in thy dealings, that thou mayest be freed from the imperceptible snares which are continually to be found by the side of the paths on which the humble walk. Do not reject troubles, by means of which thou art led towards knowledge. Do not fear temptations, by means of which thou wilt find precious things. Pray that thou mayest not be led into temptations of the soul. To those of the body thou shalt prepare thyself with all thy force, and with all thy limbs thou shalt swim in them. For without them it is impossible for thee to approach unto God, for beyond them lies divine rest. Who flees from temptations, flees from excellence, not from the temptations of desires, but from those of troubles. How does the sentence, "Pray that ye enter not into temptation," accord with, "Strive to enter in at the strait gate," and "Fear not them which kill the body," and "He that loseth his life for my sake shall find it"? In all these places our Lord recommends to us temptations, but in that he orders us to pray that we enter not into temptation. What kind of excellence can be accomplished without temptations? Or what kind of temptation is stronger than that which he orders us to undergo for his sake? And "He that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me." Pray that ye enter not into temptation. But entering into temptations occurs everywhere in his teachings. And he has said, "Without temptations the kingdom of heaven is not found." Oh, how straight is the way of thy teachings, our Lord! And he who does not discriminate with knowledge as he reads, will always remain without it, as far as his insight is concerned. When the sons of Zebedee and their mother desired of him to sit with him in the kingdom, he postulated this: "Are ye able to suffer gladly the cup of temptations? Are ye able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" And how orderest thou here, O our Lord, "Pray that ye enter not"? Which are the temptations into which we shall pray not to enter? Pray that thou enterest not into temptation concerning thy belief. Pray that thou enterest not into temptation through mental presumption, with the demon of abuse and haughtiness. Pray that thou enterest not, under God's admission, into the manifest temptations of the senses, which Satan is able to instill unto thee with God's permission, on account of the foolish thoughts thou hast cherished. Pray that the witness of chastity be not taken away from thee, lest thou be tempted in the flames of sin without him. Pray that thou enterest not into the temptation of abusing anything. Pray, therefore, that thou enterest not into psychic temptations, namely, those which lead the soul into struggle, doubt, and allurements. But prepare for the bodily ones with thy whole body, and swim in them with all thy limbs, thy eyes full of tears, that thou be found amidst them with thy guardian. For without temptations, God's care cannot be perceived, and familiarity of speech with him cannot be acquired, and spiritual wisdom cannot be learnt, and the love of God cannot be implanted in the soul. Before having experienced temptations, man prays unto God as a stranger. But when he has entered into troubles for the sake of his love, without being changed then, as one that has laid upon God the obligation of paying a certain loan, he is reckoned as his housemate and his friend, who has fought, for the sake of his will, against the host of his enemies. This is the meaning of, pray that ye enter not into temptation. And further, pray that thou enterest not into temptations for the sake of thy self-exaltation, but for the sake of thy love of God, that his power may be conspicuous in thee. Pray that thou enterest not into such on account of the folly of thy thoughts and deeds, but in order that thou provest to be a friend of God, and his power be glorified in thy endurance. On the mercy of our Lord in this matter, who measures his word in accordance with human weakness. Further, he deals with us in this matter compassionately. If thou considerest bodily things, it appears that God, also in this point, has remembered the weakness of nature. It was possible that, on account of the wretchedness of the body, we should not find fortitude against the power of the temptations whenever it should be present itself, and consequently we should even leave the path of truth, being overcome by troubles. Therefore he orders us that, as much as possible, we should avoid entering willfully into temptation. And not only this, but he even says, pray that you be not found in it without just cause, if it be possible to please God without temptation. But if very great excellence is desired, when temptations assail, and that most terribly, and if that excellence cannot be accomplished without a man's bearing them, in that case it is not becoming to spare ourselves or any one. Even on account of fear, thou shalt not shrink from that great thing upon which the life of thy soul depends, putting forth as an apology for thy laxness. Pray that ye enter not into temptation, for such as those, concerning whom it is said that they sin secretly by fulfilling the commandments. If one of the divine commandments comes to be disassociated from a man, be it the state of chastity, or the habit of holiness, or the confession of faith, or the testimony concerning the word of God, or the cautiously guarded of the other prescriptions of the law, it is impossible that he should not fall if he be afraid of temptations. Therefore he has to despise the body with complete confidence, and to entrust God with its soul, and to proceed in the name of the Lord. And he that was with Joseph in the land of Egypt, and who was the witness of his chastity, and who was with Daniel in the pit of lions, and with Hananiah and his companions in the furnace, and with Jeremiah in the pit of mire, and who saved him and made him an object of compassion in the midst of the camp of the Chaldeans, who was with Peter in the prison and brought him out of it through the shut gates, and with Paul in the synagogues of the Jews. In short, he who in all generations was with his servants always and everywhere, and showed in them his power, and made them victorious, and guarded them miraculously, so that they saw his salvation manifestly at the time of their troubles. He will strengthen and guard him in the midst of the storms which surround him. Therefore he shall arm himself against the invisible foe and his hosts with the zeal of the Maccabees and of the other holy prophets, apostles, martyrs, confessors, and recluses, who have maintained the divine laws and the spiritual commandments in frightful places and among difficult and fearful temptations, and who have thrown the world and the body behind them, and cling to the truth in them without giving way to the constraint pressing both body and soul, and endured as heroes. In short, whose names are written in the book of life unto the coming of our Lord. And their deeds are preserved in the book by God's decree for our instruction and encouragement, according to the testimony of the blessed apostle, so that we may get insight from them and learn the way of God, placing their stories before our mental eyes as living images, that we may resemble them and conform the ways of our behavior unto theirs after the pattern of the ancients. To the soul endowed with mind, the words of God are delightful, as oily foods which make fat the body, to the palate of those who are healthy. The stories of the just are as desirable to the ear of the perfect as a constant watering to young plantations. Listening to God's providential leading of the ancients be estimated by thee as precious drugs for weak eyes. And let the recollection of it be kept with thee at all times of the day. Meditate and think of it and learn wisdom from it, that thou be able to receive in thy soul with honor the recollection of God's greatness, and find for thyself everlasting life in Jesus Christ, the mediator of God and mankind, who was one in his two natures. Though the legions of the angels are not able to look upon the glory surrounding his majestic throne, yet for thy sake he has appeared before the world the most contemptible and humble of man, without form or comeliness, and while his invisible nature was not within the reach of the apprehension of created beings, he accomplished his providential dealings by covering himself with a veil made of the stuff of our limbs, in order to save the life of all. This is he through whom he has purified many peoples, and on whom the Lord has laid the sin of us all, as Josiah says, "It pleased the Lord to humble him and to put him to grief." Sin has been placed in him who knew no sin, to whom, for his providential dealings in all generations for our sake, be glory and praise and thanksgiving and adoration from all, now and at all time, and forever and ever. Amen. End of Treatise 3. Treatise 4 of Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence by Isaac of Nineveh. Translated by Arndt Jan Wensink. Treatise 4. The soul that loves God finds its rest in God only. First detach from thyself the outward bonds, then strive to bind thy heart to God. To be detached from matter is prior to being bound to God. When a child has been weaned, bread is given him as food, and a man who wishes to become excellent in God has first to wean himself from the world, as a child is weaned from its mother's breasts. Bodily labors are prior to psychic service, as the creation of the body takes place before that of the soul. For he who does not perform bodily labor does not perform psychic labors either, for the latter are born out of the former as the ears from mere grains. And he who does not perform psychic service is also devoid of spiritual gifts. Temporary suffering for the sake of the truth is not to be compared with the delight preserved for those who perform labors of excellence. As the weeping of the time of sowing is followed by the joys of harvest, so are the labors for the sake of God followed by joy. The bread earned with sweat delights the workman. Labors for the sake of righteousness, the heart has received the knowledge of Christ. Suffer contempt and humiliation in the thought of excellence, for the sake of the heart's familiarity of speech with God. Every time a man suffers a hard word with discernment, save only when it is caused by his own fault, he receives a crown of thorns on his head for the sake of Christ. Blessed is he. At other times he is crowned and knows it not. He who flees from the fame that rests on knowledge will perceive in himself the hope of the world to come. He who promises to leave the world, yet quarrels with men concerning worldly things, because he is not willing to give up anything of what is agreeable unto him, is perfectly blind, because he has given up the whole world voluntarily, yet quarrels about a part of it. If anyone flees from what is agreeable unto him in this world, his mind will behold the world to come. He who is master of possessions is the slave of passions. Do not estimate gold and silver only as possessions, but all things thou possessest for the sake of the desire of thy will. He who cuts off impediments from fear of affections, he is a wise man indeed. Without the constant service of excellence, true knowledge cannot be found. Not by bodily works alone is the knowledge of life acquired, but by directing our efforts to the cutting off of mental affections. He who labors without discernment will easily become the victim of the causes of sin when they present themselves to him. Never praise him who labors with his body, but concerning his senses is lax and without constraint, namely, whose ears and mouth are open, and whose eyes are prone to wander. If thou settest up as thy aim to practice mercy, train thyself not to pursue justice in other fields, lest thou appear to work with one hand and to spill with the other, for there clemency is necessary, but here magnanimity. Let the forgiveness of those who are guilty towards thee in these things be reckoned by thee as a work of righteousness. Then thou wilt see peace springing up in thy soul from both sides. That is when thy path is superior to dignity and justice, and thou wilt favor the rise of freedom in all things. For one of the saints, speaking of these things, says, "The merciful, if he be not just, is blind, insofar as he provides others from wealth which has been gathered with justice and by his own labors, and not from the acquirements of falsehood, oppression, iniquity, and cunning." In the same way, in another place, this man preaches, "If thou sowest among the poor, sow from thy own possessions. What thou sowest from those of others is much more bitter than weeds. But I say, if the merciful be not even above justice, he is not merciful." This means that he will not only show mercy unto men on his own part, but that he will voluntarily suffer iniquity with delight, so that he does not maintain and postulate full justice in his dealings with his fellow men, but is merciful towards him, and surpassing justice by mercy, wreathing for himself the crown not of the just under the law, but of the perfect under the new covenant. To give the poor from one's own possessions, and to cover the naked on seeing them, to love the neighbor as oneself, not to do iniquity or falsehood, are things commanded also by the old law. But perfection in behavior, according to the new covenant, commands thus: "If a man takes from thee, do not demand back. Give everyone who asks from thee." And not only hast thou to suffer gladly iniquitous dealings in possessions and other outward things, but thou hast even to give thyself in behalf of thy neighbor. Merciful is he who shows his compassion towards his neighbor not only in gifts, but who, after hearing or seeing anything that causes suffering to anyone, cannot withhold his heart from burning; who, even if he receives a blow on his cheek from his brother, does not venture to repay him even with a word, and so cause him to suffer intellectually. Honor the works of vigils, then thou wilt find consolation near in thyself. Be constantly occupied with recitation in solitude, then thou wilt be drawn toward ecstasy at all times. Love poverty with endurance, that thy mind may be concentrated and so not wander. Hate abundance, that thou be preserved against confusion of mind. Cut off intercourse with the multitude, and take care of thy behavior, that thy soul be saved from spilling its inward rest. Love chastity, lest thou be put to shame at the time of prayer before he who exposes thee to strife. Acquire a pure behavior, that thy soul may exult during prayer, and joy be kindled in thy mind at the recollection of death. Keep control of small things, lest thou neglect great ones. Be not lazy with regard to labors, lest thou be put to shame when in presence of all comrades. Pursue thy work with knowledge, lest it throw thee out of thy whole course. Be not destitute of provisions, lest thy companions leave thee alone in the midst of the way and depart. Acquire freedom in thy behavior, that thou be freed from confusion. Do not use thy freedom for the sake of comfort, lest thou be the slave of slaves. Love abstinence in thy behavior, that the deliberations leading to the haughtiness of heart and lasciviousness may be restrained. That he who loves finery should acquire a humble mind is not possible, for the heart within and the habits without necessarily must be parallel one to another. Who would be able to acquire chastity of mind when he is addicted to luxuriance? And who could acquire humble inward deliberations when he is pursuing outward glory? And who is he, that being lascivious without and lax in his limbs, should be chaste in his heart and pious in his deliberations? When the mind is guided by the senses, it feeds with them upon the food of the beasts. But when the senses are guided by the mind, they feed with it upon the sustenance of the angels. Vainglory is a servant to fornication, if it is not concerned with behavior, to haughtiness. To humility, brevity is proper. Love of glory is connected with prolixity. The former, through constant concentration, attains to contemplation and arms the soul unto chastity. The latter, through the continual wandering of the mind, gathers provisions through contact with outward things and defiles the heart. It touches lasciviously upon the nature of things and excites the mind through lascivious deliberations. The former is spiritually concentrated by contemplation and moves its possessors toward glory. Compare not all powers and signs that are worked in the whole world with a man's consciously sitting in solitude. Love the ease of solitude rather than satisfying the hunger of the world and the converting of the multitude of heathen peoples from error unto adoring God. Let it be more excellent in thy eyes to detach thyself from the bonds of sin than to detach the subdued unto liberty from those who subject their bodies. Prefer to make peace with thyself in harmony with the Trinity within thee, body, soul, and spirit, rather than to appease those who are angry at thy teachings. Love simplicity of speech together with experienced knowledge within, rather than the production of a gihon of teachings by acuteness of mind and out of a deposit of hearsay and ink. Be anxious to quicken the deadness of thy soul caused by affections unto the emotion of the impulses in God, rather than to quicken those who are dead in the natural sense. There have been many people who have exercised powers, quickened the dead, bestowed their labor upon the erring, done great signs, and drawn many people towards God by exciting their admiration of the things done by them. But afterwards, those who have saved others have fallen into impure and disreputable passions, and after they had given life to others, they have brought themselves to death and caused themselves to stumble by the offense given by their works. The cause of this is, that while they were still sick of soul, they did not care for their own healing, but plunged themselves into the sea of the world in order to heal the souls of others, being still sick themselves. So they have bereft themselves of the hope in God, as I said before, because the weakness of their senses was not yet able to bear the touch of the rays of worldly things that excite usually the vehemence of the affections in those who still are in want of caution. I mean the sight of women and comfort and money and worldly things, and the passion for governing and for exalting oneself above others. Be despised by fools for simplicity, not by the wise for audacity. Seek poverty for humility's sake, and do not seek riches for the sake of audaciousness. Confound critics by the power of thy virtues, not by thy word, and the impudence of those who will not be persuaded, by the peacefulness of thy lips, not by sounds. Confound the lascivious by thy honorable behavior, and those of audacious sensuality by the chastity of thy eyeballs that are concentrated within thee in quiet. Deem thyself a stranger wherever thou enterest all thy life long, that thou mayest be able to flee from the great damages rising from freedom of speech. Think concerning thyself always that thou knowest nothing, that thou mayest be liberated from the reprehensible things caused in thee by conceit, then thou wilt be entitled to direct others. Let thy mouth constantly administer blessing, then the scorn of anyone will never hurt thee. Disdain gives birth to disdain, blessing to blessing. Think concerning thyself always that thou needest teaching, in order that thou be found a wise man during thy whole life. Do not hand down to others as thy own the practical ethics that thou hast not yet reached, lest thou be put to shame by thyself, and thy deception appear from the comparison with thy behavior. But if thou speakest concerning what is becoming, speak as one belonging to the class of pupils, not as an authority, having before subdued thyself and shown thyself as being less than thy listener. then thou wilt give also thy hearers an example of humility, and thy words will spur them unto the course towards good works, and thou wilt be honored in their eyes. As much as is possible for thee, speak about such things with tears, so that it be profitable unto thyself and thy companions, and attract grace towards thee. If by the grace of Christ thou hast reached the delight of the mysteries of the visible created things, which is the first summit of knowledge, then arm thy soul against the spirit of slander. For without arms thou canst not hold thy place in this country, but thou wouldst soon be killed secretly by the seducers. Let thy arms be fasting and tears, which thou sheddest in constant self-humiliation, and prudence against reading books, which accentuate the differences between the confessions, with the aim of causing schisms, which provides the spirit of slander with a mighty weapon against the soul. When thy stomach is replenished, do not venture to scrutinize, or thou wilt regret it. Understand what I say. In a full stomach there is no knowledge of the mysteries of God. Be occupied with the books of God's providence intensely, without becoming satisfied. They have been composed by holy men, and show the aim of his different works in his establishing the different natures of the world. Let thy mind be strengthened by them, and thou wilt acquire enlightened impulses from their subtlety. Then thy mind will go its way with a clear consciousness toward the aim of understanding the right scheme of the creation of the world, according to the laudable wise intention of the Creator of the natures. Read in the two testaments, which God has destined for the instruction of the whole world, so that it should be dazzled by the power of his providence in every generation and be enveloped in wonder. Such recitations and the like are useful to this aim. Let thy recitation take place in complete rest, while thou art free from too great care for the body and from the disturbance of practice. Then the recitation will give thy soul a delicious taste, by the sweet insight, exalted above the senses, which the soul, by constant intercourse with it, perceives in itself. Do not deem the words that are founded upon experience as a babbling of those who sell words, lest thou remain in darkness till the end of thy life, bereft of their profit, groping in the night in times of war, nay, even falling into one of the pits, under the pretext of clinging to truth. This shall be the sign for thee, when thou art near to enter that country, when grace begins to open thy eyes, so that they perceive things by essential sight. At that time thy eyes will begin to shed tears till they wash thy cheeks, even by their multitude, and the vehemence of the senses will be calmed, so that they will be shut up within thee peacefully. If any man teach thee otherwise, do not believe him. To ask from the body anything else, as a manifest sign of the real apperception, than tears, is not allowed to thee, save only if the influence of the members of the body be silent. This takes place when the mind is elevated above earthly beings, and the body is without tears, apprehension, and emotionality, except only its natural animal existence. For this knowledge does not stoop to take with it as secondary comparisons of spiritual sight the ideas of the things of the sensual world. Whether in the body or out of it, I do not know. It is God who knows this as well as the fact that he has heard unutterable words. All that is heard by the ears can be spoken, but he did not hear sensible sounds, nor did he see in a vision of corporeal sensible images, but with the impulses of the mind, in a state of rapture apart from the body, the will having no part in it. The eye never saw the like, the ear never heard its equal, and his varied knowledge never dreamt of recollecting the likeness of what his heart saw, namely, that which God has in store to show the pure in heart when they have become dead to the world. Not corporeal sight received through the eyes of the flesh in gross distinctions, nor fantasies which they themselves form in their mind in a secondary way, but simplicity of contemplation concerning things of intellect and faith, the contrary of partition and division, that show the images of the elements. Fix thy gaze on the sphere of the sun according to thy visual strength, and only with the object of enjoying its rays, not with the aim of scrutinizing the course of its wheel, lest even thy limited sight be taken from thee. If thou find honey, eat in measure, lest thou, having become satisfied, hast to reject it. The nature of the soul is of small dimensions, and sometimes it proceeds onwards, desiring to learn what is beyond its nature. And many times, during the course of recitation and the contemplation of things, it grasps one or more things. Yet the sum of its knowledge is insignificant as compared with what it found. But how far does its knowledge penetrate? Until its deliberations are clad with emotions and trembling. Then it hastens to turn backwards from fear, venturing from time to penetrate into the luminous things. But fear withholds it on account of the frightfulness of these things, and discernment warns in silence the mind of the soul not to be audacious lest it should die. What is too hard for thee, seek not. What is too strong for thee, search not. Scrutinize with thy intellect that which has been allowed to thee, and do not venture to approach unto hidden things. Adore therefore and praise in silence, and confess thy inability to understand. For too much for thee has been shown to thee, but do not trouble thyself with the rest of his works. As it is not good to eat much honey, so it is not good to examine laudable words. Lest, desiring to gaze from a great distance before we have approached near, we be exhausted by the interminable way, without having the power to gaze, and be injured. For sometimes instead of truth, fantasies arise, when namely the intellect becomes too weary to understand, and forgets its true essence. And the wise Solomon has well said that he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is in ruins and without walls. It is not necessary to search for God in heaven and earth, and to send out our mind to seek him in different places. Purify thy soul, O man, and strip thyself from the thought of recollections which are unnatural, and hang before thy impulses the curtain of chastity and humility. Thereby thou wilt find him that is within thee, for to the humble the mysteries are revealed. If thou wouldest give thyself to the service of the pure prayer of the mind and to constant vigils in order to acquire a mind clad with light, withdraw thyself from the sight of the world, and cut off intercourse by speech, and refuse to receive in thy cell thy accustomed friend, even if he comes for the sake of excellence, save only him that has the same aim as thyself and shares in the secrets of thy behavior. If thou art in fear of distraction and secret psychic intercourse, which originates spontaneously without our seeking it, cut off from thee even outward intercourse. Let thy prayers be followed by works of excellence, that thy soul may see the flower of the light of truth. In consequence of the heart's freedom from external recollections, the mind will receive the gift of ecstatic understanding of things. The soul can easily be accustomed to interchange one occupation with another, if we only bestow some little care and trouble upon it. Burden it with the labor of reading books expounding the narrow ways of behavior, contemplation, and the stories of the saints, even if it does not perceive delight in the beginning, because of the darkness and disturbance originating in present recollections. Then it will interchange one habit with another. Accordingly, when thou risest for prayer and service, instead of meditating worldly things, scriptural thoughts will be pictured in the mind, and thereby the recollection of that which it saw and heard before will be forgotten and effaced in it. So thy mind will reach purity. This is what has been said. The mind is made chaste by recitation when it comes to prayer, and by recitation it is enlightened during prayer. This means the soul will find strength to interchange outward distraction with the habits of prayer, namely, essential understanding shining in the mind on account of the wondrous recollections of that world. How often at those times has the power of contemplation, stimulated by the scriptures, made silent and stupefied the solitary during prayer, and left him standing without impulses. The same power that cuts off prayer by delight, as I have said, giving rest to the heart and bringing to silence its impulses, the psychic and bodily members being in rest. Those know what I say, who have experienced this in their soul, who have penetrated into its mysteries, who have not learnt it from others, or snatched it from writings which so often are found to falsify truth. A full stomach shrinks from examining spiritual questions, as a harlot from speaking of chastity. A conscience full of disease abhors fat food. A mind full of the world cannot approach the investigation of divine service. Fire cannot burn fresh wood. The love of God cannot be kindled in a heart that loves comfort. A harlot cannot cling to the love of one man, neither can the soul that is tied to many things cling to loving spiritual teachings. As he who has never seen the sun with his eyes is not able, on the basis of hearing about it, to imagine its light in his mind, or to receive some image in his soul, or to perceive the beauty of its rays, so he who in his soul does not have perception for the taste of spiritual service, and whose behavior has never brought him experience of those mysteries, so that he is able to conceive in his mind an image resembling the truth, is unable to find real conviction in his soul, nor to attain the essence of the matter through human teachings and training in writings. If thou possessest anything above thy daily sustenance, go and give it the poor, and then offer unto God prayer with frankness. This means, speak with God as a son with his Father. There is nothing which brings the heart so near unto God as mercy, and nothing which gives peace to the mind as voluntary poverty. Many will scorn thee as an ignorant because of thy liberality, and for giving thyself without stint for the sake of the fear of God. They will not call thee wise or steady of mind because of thy asceticism. If anyone is riding on a horse and stretches out his hand, do not withdraw from him thy hand, in which is that which his need truly requires. For at that time he is needy as one of the indigent. And what thou givest, give it with a bountiful eye, and make thy face glad towards him. And give him above what he asks, that which he does not seek. Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find remuneration after many days. Do not make any distinction between the rich and the poor, nor know who is worthy and who is not worthy. Deem all men worthy of bounty on thy part, especially because thou spurrest them unto truth thereby. The soul can easily be drawn by corporeal things to the thought of the fear of God. Also, our Lord shared his table with publicans and harlots, without making any distinction between those who were worthy and those who were not, seeking to spur them on thereby unto the fear of God, and to bring them, through communion in bodily things, unto spiritual communion. Therefore deem all people worthy of bounty and honor, be they Jews or miscreants or murderers, especially if they be thy brothers and comrades who have erred from the truth on account of ignorance. When thou dost well, do not wish a remuneration in this world, for both thou wilt be recompensed by God. If possible, do not even wish a remuneration in the world to come, but be excellent only by the love of God. The degree of love is more intimate than that of service unto God. Nay, it is more intimate in its mystery, with an intimacy that surpasses that of service as the souls, the bodies. If thou hast set for thyself the aim of renunciation, and by the grace of God thou hast been freed from care, and exalted above the world by thy renunciation, take care lest, on account of thy love of the poor, thou desire to fall back into the care of possessions and things, even with the aim of giving alms, falling thereby into trouble, taking from one to give unto another, for thou wouldest expose thy honor to contempt by thy propensity to accost others in thy search for these incognate things, and thou wouldest fall back from the height of thy liberated mind unto care for earthly things. Thy rank is higher than that of almsgivers. I pray thee, do not make thyself an object of laughter. The latter is the class of adolescents being educated, the former is the way of perfection. If thou possessest, spend at once. If not, be not desirous to possess. Purify thy life from luxuriousness and superfluous things. This will necessarily bring thee towards asceticism. Necessity bears many things which our will, as long as possible, would not submit to bear. Those who have overcome outward struggle have also annihilated inward fear, and no compulsion can force them to go its way by confounding them with strife before and behind. Outward struggle I name that which a man excites by the senses against himself foolishly, namely, worldly dealings, hearing and seeing, speech and stomach, gradually and continually associating himself with the practice of life, so that the soul is blinded and becomes unable, because of external troubles that meet it, to discern itself in the hidden strife that arises. Then, for the sake of quiet, he subdues that which comes from within. But if a man closes the gates of the town, there will be a strife face to face, and he will not fear from the ambushes outside the town. Blessed is the man who knows these things and endures them in silence, without even then imposing upon himself much work, but interchanging the whole of his bodily service with the labor of prayer, if he is able to do so, who, proceeding from service to service, does not join anything to the worship of God, consisting in prayer and recitation, but believes that, when serving God and meditating upon him night and day, he will not leave him in need of the necessary things he needs, because he does not work for himself. If anyone is not able to bear solitude without service, he must not necessarily have recourse to it, but he shall take it as a helpful means only, without eagerness, and as a secondary thing, not as a principal commandment. This applies to the weak. Manual work is called by Euagrius an impediment to the recollection of God. The fathers have prescribed service to the indigent and despondent, not to those who are zealous to perform their legal obligations. When God opens thy mind from within, and thou givest thyself to frequent kneelings, let no care of anything take hold of thee, though the demons secretly persuade thee to do so. Then see and wonder at what is born in thee from these things. Do not compare any of the ethical practices with a man's throwing himself day and night on his face before the cross, his hands turned backwards. If thou desirest that thy fervor may never abate, and that thy tears may never fail, then practice this. Blessed art thou, O man, if thou thinkest of what I have told thee, without seeking any other thing night and day. Then thy light will be spread out like dawn, and thy righteousness will shortly appear. Then thou wilt be like an exalting paradise, and like a fountain never destitute of water. Behold, how many signs of grace happen to a man from providence. Sometimes a man will be on his knees at the time of prayer, his hands spread out or stretched towards heaven, his face looking to the cross, and, so to speak, his whole emotion and mind stretched out towards God in supplication. And while absorbed in these beseechings and pains at this time, and of a sudden a fountain of delight will spring from his heart, his limbs will relax, his eyes be darkened, his face bowed down, and his deliberations be confused, so that even his knees are no longer able to lean on the earth, from the exalting joy of the sign of grace that spreads through his whole body. Distinguish, O man, what thou art reading. Can these things be known from ink? Or can the taste of honey be spread over the palate of the reader with written documents? If thou dost not seek, thou wilt not find. And if thou dost not wake and knock fervently at the gate without a break, thou wilt not be answered. Who can hear these things and be desirous of outward righteousness, unless he who is not able to bear the bonds of the cell? But if there be anyone who is not able to do these things, since it is a gift of God that a man remain within the door, he should not however desist from this other part, lest he be reft of the two parts of life. For until the outward man becomes dead to the ways of the world, not only to sin, but also to the whole bodily service, and the inward man to the seducing recollections of evil things, until the natural impulse is brought low and the body has almost died through labors, so that the sweetness of sin has no more mastery over the heart, the Spirit of God does not spread its sweetness, and man's limbs are not unveiled to life, and divine impulses do not show themselves in the soul. And as long as a man's heart is not freed from earthly care, except those necessary things which nature imposes upon him at the time of his necessity, and which he leaves also to God to arrange, spiritual drunkenness cannot rise in him, and that madness, for which the apostle was disdained, he will not perceive, for the multitude of books had made him mad. But I do not say this in despair, namely, that unless a man reach the depth of perfection, the grace of God will not be given him, and consolation will not come to him. Verily, when a man rejects evil things and becomes wholly alienated to them and clings to good things, in a short time he will be aware of profit. And if he shows only a little zeal, he will find the consolation of the forgiveness of sins in himself, and he will be dignified with grace and receive many good things. But he is little when compared with him who has become wholly alienated to the world and has found in himself, as it were, the blessings of the world to come, and has reached that for the sake of which Christ reached us. To whom, and to his Father, and to the Holy Ghost, be glory and praise forever and ever. Amen. Here ends the fourth discourse. End of Treatise 4. Treatise 5 of Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence, by Isaac of Nineveh, translated by Arent Jan Wensink. Treatise 5. God has made great the honor of man by the twofold teachings he has given him, and from every side he has opened for him a door through which he has access unto knowledge. Ask from nature a true witness concerning thyself, then thou wilt not err. If thou goest yet astray, let thyself be taught by that second witness who will bring thee back to the way from which thou hast erred. A distracted heart cannot help but erring, and wisdom will not open its gate before it. He who is able to understand through essential knowledge to what a degree of equality all men will come in the end, will not seek another teacher concerning the contemptibility of the world. The first book given by God to the rational beings is the nature of the created things. Written teachings have been added only after aberration. He who does not willingly remain far from things causing sin will be drawn towards them involuntarily. Things causing sin are wine and women, riches and bodily health. They are not to be called sin in themselves, but on account of man's weakness and their unlawful use, nature is easily drawn by them, more easily than by any other thing, towards different sins, and therefore there is need of peculiar caution in regard of them. If thou rememberest continually and recognizest truly that thou art weak, thou wilt never overstep the borders prescribed by watchfulness. Despised above all things among men is poverty, but much more despised by God is haughtiness of heart and a disdainful spirit. Among men, riches are honored, by God a humble soul. When thou intendest to begin with one of the virtues, first prepare thyself, lest by the evil things which it causes, thou shouldest fall into doubt concerning the truth. If the evil one sees someone beginning with one of the virtues in the fervor of faith, he attacks him by vehement and terrible temptations, with the intention that he be frightened by them, so that the love of his mind may abate, and his fervor not rise again to bring him near to the works of God. And thus, because of fear of temptations accompanying good works, he hopes that nobody will practice them any more. Thou, however, prepare thyself to meet the evil things accompanying virtues bravely and strongly, and then begin. If thou dost not expect evil things, do not begin with excellence. The man who is in doubt concerning the Lord is persecuted by his own shadow. At the time of satiety he will be hungry, and at the time of peace his ruin will be heavy. But whoever confides in God, his heart will be strong, and his honor will be manifest before the crowds, and his glory before his enemies. The commandments of God are better than the treasures of the whole earth. He who acquires his laws in his heart will find the Lord in them. He who meditates upon God in the night will acquire him as a housemate. He who is pliable to his will find the angels of heaven his teachers. He who trembles before sins will pass without stumbling even through a dangerous place, and at the time of darkness he will find a light within himself. If anyone tremble before sins, his footsteps will be guarded by the Lord, and mercy will precede his failures. He whose faults are small in his own eyes will fall into those which are worse than the former ones, and it will be necessary that he pay for them sevenfold. Sow alms in humility, and thou wilt reap mercy in the court of justice. Whereby thou hast lost goods, thereby thou shalt acquire them again. If thou hast to pay a penny to God in some way or other, he will not accept a pearl from thee in its place, for in this case that thing is necessary. If thou hast lost chastity, let not fornication take its place. If thou givest alms as a reparation, he will not accept them from thee. He postulates saintliness for saintliness. And if thou wrongest not the poor, let not unjust possession take the place of that. While thou art refraining from bread, let not injustice usurp its place, so that thou must struggle with some other thing. Oppression is eradicated by compassion and renunciation. If thou leavest the plant in its place, thou wilt have to struggle with some other thing, according to the word of the great teacher, Mar Ephraim. Take care not to fight against heat during summer, in clothes destined for winter. Thus each will reap with the contrary of that with which he sows injustice, and every illness he will combat with its peculiar antidotum. Now thou art deadly wounded by envy, while thou strugglest against sleep. When sin is still green, eradicate it, lest it cover the whole ground. He who neglects an evil thing while it is small will find it at last a hard master, and he will go in bonds before it. He who treats it severely in the beginning will easily rule it. He who bears injustice with gladness, while victory is in his hand, he has received from God the consolation of his faith clearly manifested. And he who bears oppression in humility has reached perfection. The angels will admire him. There is no profitable action more difficult and more meritorious. Do not believe thyself strong before thou hast been led into temptations, and thou hast found thyself steadfast in them. In all things thou hast to try thyself in this way. Acquire glory on account of the faith of thy heart, then thou wilt tread upon the neck of thy enemies, and thou wilt find thy mind humble. Do not confide in thy strength, lest thou be left to the weakness of thy nature, and thou learnest thy weakness in thy fall, nor in thy knowledge, lest thou be surrounded in thought with hidden ambushes and becomest confused. Acquire a humble tongue, then disdain will never hurt thee, and pleasant lips, then thou wilt be found a friend of every one. Do not boast of anything with thy tongue, because among creatures there is nothing exempt from change, and thy shame will be double when thou art found the contrary of what thou didst boast of. Everything of which thou boastest before men will surely be altered by God, so that thou mayest have a cause for humility, so that thou judge God's knowledge to be all, and believe not that there is anything true in creatures. And when thou thinkest thus, thy eyes will at all times be fixed upon him. Divine care surrounds all men at all times, but it is not seen save only by those who have purified themselves from sins and think of God perpetually. To these, then, it is revealed clearly, for when they have been led into great temptations for the sake of truth, then they receive a faculty of perception clearly as if with the eyes of the flesh. They receive it when they want it, in a sensible way, in accordance with the kind and the cause of the temptation, in order to strengthen their courage. As in the case of Jacob and Joshua the son of Nun, Hananiah and his companions, Petrus and others, to whom the figure of a man appeared in order to encourage them and to console their faith. If thou sayest that these things were acts of providence of a universal nature, let then the holy martyrs console thee, who sometimes together, sometimes one by one in separate places, have suffered for God. Not only a hidden force was with them, by which the members of their bodies were fortified against being hanged in irons and against torments of all kinds, things beyond natural power, but sometimes also holy angels were seen by them manifestly, in order that every man should know that God's care is with those who suffer for his sake for any reason, so that they themselves might receive encouragement and their torturers be ashamed. For as the former were made conspicuous by such visions, to the same degree the latter were tormented by their endurance. And what shall we say about many of the solitaries and strangers and true monks who have made wasteland habitable, and an encamping ground of the angels, who visited them on account of their worthy behavior? As true comrades serving one Lord, the heavenly hosts mingled with them in their dwelling place, solitaries who during their whole life loved solitude, who made holes in rocks their dwelling places, who gladly suffered cold and heat for the love of God. And because they left the earth and loved heaven like the angels have not concealed themselves from their sight, but sometimes they taught them concerning behavior. And again, they answered the questions they asked them concerning other things. And sometimes the angels showed them the way when they wandered through the desert. Sometimes they delivered them from temptations. Sometimes they saved them from some net of danger, which suddenly, without their foreseeing it, threatened them, some serpent, for instance, or falling from a rock, or a stone that suddenly fell down with violence from a height. Sometimes, also under the attacks of the open battles of Satan, the angels showed themselves to them manifestly, and clearly announced that they were sent in order to help them and encourage them by their words. Sometimes they also cured their pain and healed some injuries which had befallen them in some way or other by the touch of their hands. Sometimes again they imparted to their bodies, which had been weakened by abstention from all food, by their words or by the sudden touch of their hands, a force foreign to nature, adducing in some secret way a force unto the lowered nature. Sometimes they brought them food, warm bread and olives, and to some of them various fruits. Others they informed concerning the time of their death. And how long must be the enumeration of things concerning the love of the holy angels towards our race, and concerning the care they showed unto the righteous, as great brothers who fostered and guarded their little ones. All this serves to make clear for everyone how near God is to his friends, and how much care he bestows on those who entrust their life to his hands and follow him with a serene heart. If it is certain to thee, and thou believest that God cares for thee, thou needest not be anxious for thy body, nor have care concerning the guiding of thyself by means. But if thou doubtest this, and desirest to care for thyself without God, thou art more wretched than any man. And what does life mean to thee? Throw thy care on God, that thou be strengthened against all fear. He who once has entrusted his life to God will dwell in mental peace. Without renunciating possessions, the soul cannot be liberated from confusion of thought, and without quiescence of the senses, peace of mind cannot be perceived. And without entering into temptations, spiritual wisdom cannot be acquired. And without constant reciting, subtlety of thought cannot be learned. And without the deliberations being set at peace, the mind cannot be moved by hidden mysteries. And without the confidence of faith, one cannot venture to throw his soul amidst sorrowful and hard circumstances. Without the practical experience of God's care, the heart is not able to confide in God. And when the soul does not taste sufferings for the sake of Christ, it is not united with him in knowledge. Deem him a man of God, who constantly takes upon himself the lot of want, being moved by great compassion. He who does good to the poor finds God his provider. He who suffers want for his sake finds him to be a great treasure. God does not need anything. Only he rejoices when anyone satisfies or honors his image for his sake. When anyone asks thee and thou hast, do not say in thy heart, I will keep it for myself in order to have more comfort by it, and I will let him pass quickly. God will provide for him from another. I will bestow it upon myself. Do not speak thus, for in this way think iniquitous men, and people who do not know God deliberate thus, fostering such thoughts. But a righteous man does not give his honor to another one, nor does he let slip the opportunity for bounty. God will provide for him, certainly in some other way. If he knows that he is in trouble, God will not abandon anyone. But thou art willing immediately to leave God's honor, and to throw his bounty from thee. On the other hand, rejoice if thou possessest, and give, saying, Glory to thee, O God, who hast granted unto me that I find someone to comfort. And if thou possessest not, rejoice the more, thanking God with many thanksgivings, saying, I thank thee, O God, who hast granted me the honor of becoming poor for thy sake, and who hast deemed me worthy to taste sufferings enjoined in thy commandments, namely, illnesses and poverty, such as the saints have tasted who have gone this way. And if thou art ill, say, Blessed are those who find in the things which God sends us for our profit, the aim for which God has destined them. God sends sickness for the sake of the health of the soul. One of the saints once said, The following I have taken as a sign. When a solitary does not serve God in the right way, and is not zealous in his works, God certainly will send him a temptation to occupy his thoughts, lest he be wholly idle, and by complete idleness his mind turn aside to thinking of things of the left hand. But if he is not willing to think of excellence, the influence of the temptations will cause him to think of it, and not to think of idle things. This God does with every man who loves him. When he sees that he begins to disdain his works, he sends a heavy sorrow in order to make him wise and to chastise him. Therefore, when such people call to him, he does not pay attention, nor does he hasten to free them, till they have become weary and know that they have to bear these things on account of their neglect. When ye spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when ye make many prayers, I will not hear. Even if this was said to others, still it is certainly applicable to those who leave the way. But if God is so compassionate, why do we then so frequently knock at his door in trouble and pray, and yet he turns away from our prayer? He says, Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, nor his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear. Remember the Lord at all times, then he will remember thee when evil approaches unto thee. He has made thy nature a receptacle of accident, and in the world where he has created and left thee, he has made frequent the causes of accidents and temptations. He has made thy nature a small receptacle of these things. Evil things are not far from thee, neither are they a few in number. For they rise from within thee when he gives a sign, and from under thy feet, and from the place where thou art standing. But like one eyelid is near the other, so temptations are near the children of men. With wisdom, God has provided these things for thee in this way, for thy profit, that thou mayest continually knock at his door, and that for fear of sorrowful events, the thought of him may constantly recur to thy mind, and thou be near to God in constant prayer, and sanctified by constant thought of him in thy heart. And when thou callest unto him, and he answers thee, thou wilt know that thy Savior is God. And thou wilt perceive thy God, who has created thee, and is thy provider and preserver, therein that he has made in thy behalf 2 worlds, one for thy instruction, as it were a school for a short time, and another one, a paternal home and thy abode for ever and ever. He has not made thee apathetic, lest thou shouldest desire divine rank and receive what Satan received. Nor has he made thee incapable of error, or lest thou shouldest be like the beings which are bound, and thou shouldest receive thy good and thy evil without profit or remuneration, as the other corporeal beings on the earth. How many blows and humiliations together with thanksgivings are born from the capacity for affections, and fear, and also error, is manifest for everyone, so that it should be known that our zeal for righteousness and our turning aside from evil are of our will, and that the honor and disdain caused thereby should be put to our credit. Thus we are put to shame, and we fear on account of disdain, but we thank God and press toward the good on account of honor. All these instructions he has multiplied for thee, lest freed from them on account of thy not needing them, or thy nature not being capable of them, exalted above fear and affecting things, thou shouldest forget God and turn away from him, and invent many gods. For though subjected to affections and want, which scourges were sent against them on account of paltry riches and short-lived temporal power and precarious health, still many have not only invented many gods, but have even ventured in their insanity to pretend to be of divine nature. Therefore he has turned thee away from all these things, through that which troubles thee from time to time, lest he should be angry with thee on account of thy turning aside and destroying thee from before him in punishment. I omit the ungodliness and the sins that arise from health and lack of fear and comfort, even though that which has been mentioned above should not happen. Therefore, by sufferings and distress, he has caused thee frequently to recall him in thy heart, and by fear of adversities, he incites thee to turn towards the gate of his mercy. By liberating thee from these troubles, he sows in thee causes of love unto him. And when thou hast found love, he brings thee near to the honor of the sons. He shows thee the richness of his bounty and the steadfastness of his care for thee. Then he will make thee perceive the holiness of his honor and the hidden mysteries of the nature of his greatness. How shouldest thou have become acquainted with these things if there had not been adversities? For through these the love of God is able to increase, namely, by understanding his acts of bounty and by recalling his various acts of care. All this good is born from thee, from things causing grief, if thou knowest to give thanks. Therefore remember God, that he may remember thee constantly, and when he remembers thee and saves thee, thou wilt receive all these goods. Forget him not in idle distraction, lest he also forget thee in thy temptations. In prosperity be near to him and obedient, that thou mayest have freedom of speech with him in trouble, because of thy constantly being near to him in thy heart by means of thy prayer. Sit before his face all thy time, thinking of him and recollecting him in thy heart, lest seeing him only after long, thou shouldest lack freedom of speech with him on account of bashfulness. A high degree of freedom of speech is born from constant intercourse. Constant intercourse with men is of a bodily nature. That with God is psychic meditation and offerings in prayer. On account of its intensity, this meditation is sometimes mingled with ecstasy. For the heart of those who seek the Lord rejoices. Seek the Lord, ye sinners, and be strengthened in hope in your thoughts. Seek his face by repentance at all time, and you will be sanctified by the holiness of his face, and you will be purified from your unrighteousness. Speed unto the Lord, ye unrighteous, the Lord who forgives unrighteousness and effaces sins. For he has sworn, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that he turn from his way and live. I have spread out my hands all the day unto a rebellious and disobedient people. And why will ye die, O house of Jacob? Turn unto me, then I will turn unto you. And by Ezekiel he says, when the wicked turns from his way unto the Lord, and do that which is lawful and right, the sins he has committed will not be remembered, but he shall live, saith the Lord. Thus it is also with the righteous. When he turneth from his righteousness and committeth sin and iniquity, the righteousness he has done will not be remembered, but I will lay a stumbling block before him, and by the iniquity he has done, he shall die if he remains steadfast in it. Why is this? Because the iniquitous will not stumble on account of his iniquity after he turns unto the Lord. But the righteousness of the righteous will not save him when he sins, if he builds his building on that foundation. And to Jeremiah he spake thus, Take a roll of a book, and write therein all the words that I have spoken unto thee, from the day of Josiah the king of Judah, even unto this day. It may be that the house of Judah will hear and fear, and they may return every man from his evil way, and turn again unto me, that I may forgive their sins. And the sage has said, He that covereth his sins shall not prosper, but whoso confesseth and forsaketh them shall have mercy from God. And Jesaja, who was rich in revelation, says, Seek ye the Lord, and call ye upon him when ye have found him. And when he is near, let the sinner forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him turn unto me, and I will have mercy upon him, and to our God he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. Wherefore do ye spend money on that which is not bread, and your labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good. Come unto me, hear, and your soul shall live. When thou keepest the ways of the Lord, and doest his will, then thou wilt confide in the Lord. Then thou wilt call on him, and he will answer thee. Thou wilt cry, and he will say, Lo, here I am. The wicked, when evil befalls him, has confidence in God to call on him, and he is not able to expect his salvation because he has left his ways in the days of his prosperity. Seek a helper for thyself before thou hast to struggle. Seek a physician for thyself before thou art ill. Pray before distress has reached thee. Then in the time of distress thou wilt find prayer, and it will answer thee. Pray and ask before thou stumblest. Prepare thy gifts before thou makest a vow. They are thy provisions. The ark was constructed in time of peace, 100 years before its wood was planted. So when anger came, the wicked who had been comfortable in their wickedness were confounded, but the ark was a refuge for the righteous. The wicked shuts his mouth during prayer. Inward baseness takes away freedom of speech from the heart. Steadfastness of heart makes tears of joy to flow during the imploration of God. Strong endurance of injustice, borne by free will, purifies the heart. Endurance of injustice is based on contempt for the world. That a man remains steadfast during oppression, without being distressed, is caused by the fact that the heart begins to see the truth. Joy on account of oppression and injustice, borne by free will, exalts the heart. No one can bear oppression and injustice with a glad heart, save those whose deliberations have wholly become dead to the world. Those whose thoughts are wholly filled with the odor of this life are made to blaze with anger at once through vainglory, or they fall into thoughts of spite, born of the love of vainglory. Oh, how difficult is this excellence, and how honored it is with God! He who denies this behavior has to go abroad and to leave his country. It is difficult for a man to accomplish this exalted excellence in his country. The eminent and the strong only are able to bear the grief that is born of this behavior among their acquaintances, and also those who in their lifetime have become dead to this life and have abandoned hope of the consolation of this time. As grace is near to humility, so are difficult accidents to haughtiness. The heart of the Lord is towards the humble, to comfort them. The face of the Lord is against the haughty, to humiliate them. Humility receives compassion continually, but hardness of heart and unbelief meet hardships continually that seem hopeless, till of a sudden evil rises against them, and they are delivered to destruction. Make thyself small among men, then he will exalt thee even above the heads of the people. Let thy prostrations be low before all men, and be the first to salute. Then thou wilt be honored more than he who brings gold from Ophir. Be despised and rejected in thine own eyes, then thou wilt see the glory of God within thyself. Where humility sprouts, there glory will rise. If thou strivest publicly after dishonor among men, he will make thy honor great. And if thou art humble in thy heart, he will show thee his glory in thy heart. Be disdained in thy greatness, not great in thy being disdained. Learn to be disdained, while being full of the honor of the Lord, not to be honored while being injured by ulcers within. Reject honor, then thou wilt be honored. Do not love it, lest thou be rejected. If thou pursuest honor, it will flee from thee. If thou fleest from it, it will rise from thee from the place where thou hiddest thyself, and it will be a herald of thy humility to everyone. If thou givest thyself to disdain in order to be honored, the Lord will confound thee. If thou rejectest thyself for the sake of truth, he will command the creatures to praise thee. And they will reveal to thee the glory of the Creator, who from eternity speaks through them and will glorify thee as the Creator, because thou art his true image. Has any one found a man whose behavior is exalted, who is despised among men, and who is enlightened and wise and poor in spirit? Blessed is he who has humbled himself in all things, for he will be magnified in all things. He who has humbled and made himself small for the sake of God will be glorified by God. And whoever for his sake is hungry and thirsty, he will give to drink him from his good, a wine causing a drunkenness that never leaves those who drink it. And he who goes naked for his sake will be clad by him with a garment of glory. And he who is poor and indigent for his sake, His consolation will be established in his true richness. Make thyself disdained for the sake of God, then thy glory will be great, even if thou doest not perceive it. During thy whole life, deem thyself as a sinner, then thou wilt be found to be a righteous man during thy whole life. Be despised though wise, and do not err in thy wisdom. Be simple in thy wisdom, and do not assume the appearance of being wise if thou art simple. If humility elevates the despised, how much more will it elevate the honored? Flee from praise, then thou wilt be praised. Fear haughtiness, then thou wilt be exalted. For pride was not assigned to the children of man, nor haughtiness of heart to those born from a woman. If thou hast voluntarily renunciated the whole body of the world, do not quarrel with anyone concerning small parts of it. If thou hast rejected glory, flee from those who hunt praise. Flee from possessors as from possessions. Depart from the luxurious as from luxury. Flee from the lascivious as from fornication. If the memory of their habits troubles the mind, how much more if one see and be near to them? Be near to the excellent. Through them thou wilt be near unto God. Be an ascete with the humble, to learn from his ways. If to see his habits is profitable to those who see him, how much more the character of his behavior and teachings received from his lips. Love the poor. Through them thou wilt find mercy. Do not approach unto the quarrelsome, lest thou be compelled to leave thy peaceful customs. Flee not from the ugliness of the illness of the sick, for thou art also clad with flesh. Do not contend with the bitter in heart, lest thou be beaten with the rod with which they are beaten, and seeking a consolator, wilt not find any. Do not reject the cripples, lest thou enter Sheol with them. Love the sinners, but reject their works. Do not despise them because of their shortcomings, lest thou be tempted by the same. Remember that thou sharest in the stink of Adam, and that thou too art clad with his illness. To him who needs passionate prayer and soft words, do not give blame instead, lest thou cause his destruction, and his soul be demanded by thy hand. Resemble the physicians who use cold medicines against symptoms of fever. Compel thyself to show honor to thy fellow man when thou meetest him, and kiss his hand and his foot, and warm thy heart with love unto him piously. And take his hands several times, and place them upon thy eyes, and caress them with great honor. And attribute to his person beautiful things that do not belong to him. And also when he is absent, speak about him fine and beautiful things, and call him by several honorable names. By these things and the like, thou compellest him not only unto the desire of beautiful things, since he will be ashamed of the renown thou imputest him without his deserving it, and so thou wilt be able to sow in him the seed of excellent things, but by means of these habits and the like, to which thou accustomest thyself, thou wilt found in thyself peaceful and humble customs, and be liberated from many severe struggles, against which others learn to guard themselves by steady works. And not only this, but if he who receives these honors from thee has any shortcoming or fault of will, he will easily acquire from them healing, if thou lettest him clearly perceive it, but for an instant only. For he will be ashamed because of the honor shown to him, and because of the sign of love he constantly perceives in thee. This be thy aim regarding all men. And when thou becomest angry at any one, and zealous for the sake of faith, or on account of his evil works, or thou reprehendest and vituperatest him, then be cautious. We all have a just judge in heaven. But if thou art merciful, and seekest to turn him unto the truth, thou hast to suffer for him. And with tears and in love, thou must speak to him without being enraged against him, effacing all signs of hostility from thy face. Love does not know how to be angry. It is not indignant. It does not despise so as to cause suffering. Wherever the sign of love and knowledge is present, it is profound humility rising from the inner mind. End of Treatise 5. Treatise 6 of Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mystic Treatises, 6 Treatises on the Behavior of Excellence by Isaac of Nineveh, translated by Arent Jan Wensink. Treatise 6. The fact that a man may fall into accidental faults proves the weakness of his nature, namely, that our nature necessarily is liable to such things. It has not seemed good unto God, that it would be profitable for him that he should be wholly exalted above this weakness, before his nature arrived at the second creation. The fact of his being subject to chance is profitable for the subjugation of the mind, but the constant falling into faults causes audacity. There are 3 modes by which every rational soul may approach unto God: by the fervor of faith, by fear, by punishment from God. For it cannot approach unto the rank of love by its own power, but only if it is based on one of these modes. As from a disordered belly confusion of thought is born, so from wantonness in speech and confusion of habits, ignorance and folly of mind. The care of practical things confuses the soul, and the distraction of work disturbs the mind, and makes it lose its quietness, and drives away from it its peacefulness. It is becoming for the solitary who has devoted himself to heavenly work, that his mind be constantly free from care, so that, when he examines his soul and deliberates, he may not see in it anything belonging to this world, nor desire of any visible object, but that, on account of his complete absorption from temporary things, he may be able to meditate upon the law of the Lord night and day without any distraction. Bodily works without mental beauty are like a barren womb and dry breasts. They do not bring any nearer unto the knowledge of God. They have no care for a body laboring to eradicate passions from the mind, so they do not reap anything. As a man who sows on thorns and is not able to reap, so is he whose mind is injured by care and wrath and desire of gathering treasures, and who sighs on his bed on account of the frequency of his vigils and abstinence. Witness is the scripture that says, "As a nation that did righteousness and forsook not the ordinance of their God. They ask of me the ordinances of justice. They take delight in coming near unto God. Wherefore have we fasted, and thou seest not? Have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast, ye find pleasure and sacrifice unto all your idols." This means, the evil designs and the evil thoughts hold you in yourself instead of God, and sacrifice to them your liberty, a thing esteemed at all times. The sacrifice which is honored above all things, and which you ought not to omit, consists of your good works and pious inner being. A good land which makes its Lord rejoice by yielding 100-fold is the soul that is made excellent by meditation on God, in vigil day and night. The Lord will build upon its foundations and around it a cloud for shade during the day and a shining flame of fire during the night. From within its darkness, light will dawn. As a cloud obscures the rays of the moon, so the vapor of the stomach obscures the divine wisdom, so that the soul does not see it. As a hearth burning with dry wood, so is bodily desire in a full stomach. As oily matter excites the fierceness of a flame, so does the humidity of food the carnal passion in the body. The knowledge of God does not dwell in a body that loves comfort. A man who loves his body will not be deemed worthy of divine gifts. As from the travail a fruit is born that gladdens the woman, so from labors there is born in the soul the knowledge of God's mysteries. To the pusillanimous and those who love comfort, a fruit is born that causes shame. As a father shows mercy unto his son, so Christ shows mercy unto the body that performs labors, and he is near its mouth at all times. The labor of wisdom is priceless. A stranger is he who is strange, is his spirit unto every habit of this world. A mourner is he who spends all the days of this life in hunger, thirst, and mourning for the sake of the expectation of heavenly hope. A recluse is he who, removing his abode from the sight of the world and looking beyond, has only one demand in prayer, the desire of the world to be. The riches of the solitary are in his heart. The riches of the solitary are either consolation granted him from the midst of mourning, or gladness that dawns from faith, the treasury of his spirit. The compassionate is he whose spirit does not distinguish, when practicing compassion, any of the classes of men. Virginity is this, that a man not only guards his body from the corruptions of reveling, but that he also guards his chastity against his soul even when he is alone. If thou desirest chastity, restrain the course of impure deliberations, by occupying thyself with recitation and constant beseechings unto God. Then thou wilt be armed also in thy inner being against the things that spring from nature. Without those, man is able to see purity in himself. If thou art desirous to acquire compassion, first train thyself to acquire contempt for outward things, lest their importance draw the mind away from the aim which it has set before itself. The purity of compassion is known from patience in bearing wrong, and the perfection of humility from idle oppression borne gladly. If thou art really compassionate, thou wilt not be angry within thyself, when thou art bereft of thy possessions iniquitously and with injustice. And thou wilt not show thy suffering openly unto others, but let the sin of thy injustice be effaced by passionate compassion, as the headiness of wine is abated by mixing it with much water. But show thou the work of purity that arises from great mercy, by adding thereunto other things, and do well to those who do thee wrong, with gladness, as also the blessed Elisha did unto his enemies, which were come to take him prisoner, who, by praying and by blinding their eyes by visions, made manifest the power at his disposal. And if he had wished this, they would have been annihilated before him, but by providing them with food and drink and letting them go away, he made manifest the mercy he possessed within himself. If thou art truly humble, be not troubled if thou art oppressed, and do not excuse thyself in any point, but actually take upon thee the wrong laid to thy charge, without being anxious to persuade people that the matter is otherwise. On the contrary, pray that thou mayest obtain forgiveness. Some have taken upon them the evil name of fornication, and others have taken upon them deeds of adultery, for which they were too pious. And the fruit of a sin which they had not committed they made appear serious by bewailing it as if it were their own. And they implored forgiveness for sins which they had not committed from their oppressor with tears, while their soul was crowned with the full purity of chastity. Others, lest they should be praised on account of wonderful deeds performed in secret, have assumed the habits of lunatics, though they were in the full possession of their wits and their serenity, so that the holy angels, in admiration of these deeds, became spectators of the greatness of such men. Thou, however, hast assumed humility where those others have given witness against themselves. Thou art not even able to keep silence if thou art accused, and yet thou deemest thyself to be humble. If thou art really humble, try thyself by these things, whether or not thou art troubled. The many mansions in the house of the Father denote the spiritual degrees of the inhabitants of that place. This means the different gifts and the spiritual ranks in which they rejoice spiritually, and the variety of the classes of gifts. It is not to be understood in such a manner that every person has really his defined portion in the various local habitations, so that these differences manifest themselves openly in the variety of particular mansions appointed for every one. But they are to be compared with the personal advantage every one of us obtains by the personal yet common use of this imperceptible sun in accordance with the purity of his visual power. Thus, as the eyelid regulates the effusion of the quality of light, and as a lamp in one and the same house distributes the use of its light in a varied fashion, although the lamp itself is not bereft of the simplicity of its light, so as to become many with its varied aspects, so those who have been deemed worthy of that place, although dwelling in one mansion, indivisible as it is into parts, attract at a fixed time from one and the same intelligible sun, every one according to the rank of his behavior, the own delight, in one air and one place and one abode, and with one sight and one mode. The high degree of his neighbor's rank is not seen by him who is inferior, namely, not as if it arose from the many gifts of his neighbor and from the scarcity of his own gifts, so that it should be to him a cause of grief and spiritual torment. Absit! To think such things in the place of delights were impossible. Every one rejoices within himself at the gift he has been deemed worthy of, and at the height of his rank. But the outward aspect of them all is one, and the place is one. And what is still truer, they dwell as in encampments of angels, in one aerial abode, in equality of actual vision, with secret consciousness of their different ranks, in contemplative revelations that vary according to their degree. If real personal beings possess, apart from working apperceptive power, also spiritual impulses, no one will venture, even in the world to proclaim in words an order of things deviating from this one, that the only differentiation is with regard to the intellect and further spiritual powers, even though this differentiation is very manifest on account of the perfection of nature. True, therefore, is the word spoken by the Fathers. On the one hand, there is ignorance for an undetermined time. On the other hand, there is a limited time for the manifestation of its abrogation, together with the revelation of other peculiar mysteries that are defined in silence by the Supreme Being. For there is no mean between complete elevation and absolute abasement in the future separation. Either one belongs wholly to the high ones or wholly to the low ones. But within this and the other state, there are varying modes of retribution. And if this be true, as it is true, what then is the folly of some who say, I do not desire to be in the kingdom, if I only could strive after salvation from hell. Being saved from hell is the kingdom, and being without the kingdom is hell. For the scriptures do not teach 3 places in the world to be. What do they teach? When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Here the scriptures do not mention 3 classes, but 2, those of the right hand and those of the left. The difference between the dwelling place is given distinctly, and these, it says, shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of the Father, and those will depart into everlasting fire. Further, they shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham in the kingdom. And the children of the promise that have not been obedient shall go into the darkness outside the kingdom. There will be psychic weeping and grinding of teeth, which is a grief more hard than the fire. Now thou understandest that to remain far from that elevation means torturing hell. And it is beautiful for a man to admonish mankind unto beautiful things, and to bring them, by his constant care, from error to the knowledge of life. And this is the stage of our Lord and the apostles, and it is very elevated. But if he perceives within himself that by familiar and constant intercourse his inner being becomes injured by the sight of worldly things, and his serenity is disturbed so as to lose its discernment, and is darkened, since his spirit still acquires cautiousness and stricter submission of the senses. For he is sick as long as his senses are not yet healed, and wishing to heal others, he loses his own partial health of soul and quits the chaste freedom of his will for a troubled mind. Such a one has to recall the word of the apostle, who says, Strong meat belongeth to the healthy, and he shall turn back, lest he hear from them, symbolically. How art thou a physician for others, yet full of wounds thyself? Accordingly, he shall keep to himself and guard his own health only. Then instead of audible words, he shall care for a beautiful behavior, and others will profit not by his spoken words, but by the health in which he holds himself, if possible. Thus by his health they will be healed, even though he be absent. That is to say, by the zeal of his excellent deeds, which is a more excellent thing than to serve them merely with words, while sick himself, and in need of healing more than they themselves. For if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. For strong meat belongeth to the healthy, and to those whose senses have been trained and strengthened so as to receive all kinds of food, that is, those that are strengthened against all sensual shocks, because the heart is healthy on account of its training in perfection. But when Satan desires to defile the chaste spirit by thoughts of fornication, he first tempts its endurance by vainglory, since the beginning of such a thought does not resemble that of the affections. This he does with the guarded spirit, into which he cannot easily instill a thought which is purely evil. But when he that was strong, by meditating on old thoughts, has left his fortress, and when he is at some distance from it, Satan causes him to be assailed by full opportunity of fornication, by associating the spirit with lascivious things. At first the spirit feels a sudden terror when it meets them, because of the chastity of the deliberations that meet the worldly things, for the mind, their governor, has refrained from looking at them before. But it falls from the height of its original thought, even though it be not defiled, and it does not turn and regains quickly the former deliberations which are the cause of the secondary ones. Then, when it meets often with these things, custom will blind the discernment of the soul through frequency of meeting. So, in accordance with the quantity and the character of the first affection, is the submission to the second. To avoid the affections by the recollection of virtues is easier and more beautiful than to vanquish them in strife. For when the affections leave their place and are in motion so as to show themselves at strife, then they also print on the soul forms and images. People of this rank possess a great valiance, so that they draw strength from the spirit, but the mind is greatly disturbed and troubled. By the former way of proceeding mentioned, even the traces of affections are not known in the spirit when they have departed. Bodily labors in meditating upon the Scriptures preserve purity, and labors are made firm by hope and fear. Hope and fear are established in the spirit by seclusion from the children of man and by constant prayer. Until man has received the Comforter, he needs written documents in order to fix in his heart by images profitable recollections, and by constant meditation upon them he will renew the attractions of excellence and see in himself caution against the narrow paths of sin, for he does not yet possess the dominating force of spirit, which reduces to oblivion those powers which bereave man of profitable recollections and induce in him languor by distraction of mind. But when spiritual force enters and dwells in the intelligible forces of the operative soul, then there are fixed in the heart, instead of written laws, spiritual commandments, which the heart learns secretly from the spirit, which does not need the help of sensible material by the medium of the senses. Whenever the mind learns from matter, this instruction is followed by error and forgetfulness. But whenever it draws instruction from incorruptible things, its recollection will also be incorruptible, founded on their intelligible nature. There are good deliberations, and there is a good will. There are evil deliberations, and there is an evil heart. The former, without the latter, are of little account for remuneration. The latter are impulses which blow over the mind, as the winds that blow over the sea, causing waves to arise. But the latter are the roots. And in accordance with the fundamental direction is also the good or the bad remuneration, not in accordance with the motion of the deliberations. For the soul does not cease from setting into motion varying deliberations, and if thou calculatest a remuneration for all these, even though they have no root beneath, thou wilt be near to changing thy remuneration and thy retributions 1,000 times every day. A young bird without wings is the mind that has lately left the bonds of the affections by means of the works of repentance. At the time of prayer, it strives to exalt itself above earthly things, but it cannot, for it creeps still on the surface of the earth, where also the serpent crawls. But it concentrates its deliberations by recitation and works and fear and care for excellent qualities, for beyond these it does not yet know anything, and these keep the mind pure for a short time. But then recollections will return, troubling and defiling the heart. for he does not yet perceive the air of peace and liberty, which concentrates the mind for a long time, keeping it quiet without any recollection of worldly things, for it still has wings of flesh, namely, bodily virtues, which are exercised openly. But it does not yet see and perceive the theoretical significance of the virtues exercised, which consists in wings of the mind, by which it approaches unto heavenly things and is removed far from the earth. As long as God serves man in a way that can be perceived by the senses and in outward things, the Prince of things will be delineated in his deliberations, and his mind will think of divine things in bodily forms. But when he perceives that which is within things, then, according to the measure of its apperceptive power, the mind will also be exalted above the forms of things in due time. The eyes of the Lord are upon the humble, and his ears are willing to hear them. The prayer of the humble goes, as it were, from his mouth unto God's ear. O Lord my God, let my darkness be enlightened. When thou art occupied in solitude with the beautiful work of humility, when thy soul is near unto coming forth from under the darkness, this will be thy sign. Thy heart will burn and glow as with fire, night and day, so that thou wilt esteem all earthly things as ash and dung. This means that it will not even please thee to touch food, on account of the pleasure of the new, fervent deliberations, which move continually within thee. Then of a sudden the fountain of tears will be given thee, so that they flow from thy eyes, as the waters of the brooks, without compulsion, mingling themselves with all thy work, namely, with thy recitation and with thy prayer, with thy service and with thy meditation, with thy food and with thy drink, with all that thou doest, tears will stream. If thou observest this in thyself, take heart, thou hast passed through the sea. Continue thy labors, keep thy cautiousness sound, that thy grace may augment from day to day. As long as thou hast not yet met with these things, thy way has not yet finally reached the mountain of God. If this state vanishes after thou hast found it, and if this fervor abates, without thy proceeding to take another thing as a substitute, woe to thee! What hast thou lost? Either thou hast become haughty, or thou art lax. What is it that is situated after tears, and what a man meets after having passed beyond them, and what there is further after this latter state, we will describe beneath, in those chapters which deal with the course of behavior, as a thing concerning which we are enlightened by the Scriptures and by the fathers who were entrusted such mysteries. If thou hast no works, thou shalt not speak about excellence. Dearer to God are trials for righteousness' sake than all vows and sacrifices, and dearer is the odor of the sweat of the fatigue they cause than all the drugs of sweet scent and exquisite perfumes. All excellence, which does not vex the body, must be deemed by thee a miscarriage without a soul. The sacrifices of the righteous are the tears of their eyes, and their acceptable offerings are the sighs of their vigils. The saints lament because of the dullness of the body, and they sigh and send their prayers unto God with suffering. And at the voice of their lamentations, the holy hosts assemble to them in order to give them heart through hope, and to console them. The holy angels are their partners during the temptations and sufferings of the saints, because they are near to them. Labors and humility make man a god on the earth. Faith and compassion give a speedy advance to clearness. Fervor and a broken heart cannot dwell in one soul, neither do those that are drunk know control of their mind. When fervor has been given, sorrow and mourning are taken away. Wine has been given for gladness, and fervor for the joy of the soul. The former warms the heart, the word of God, the mind. Those who are kindled by fervor are transported to the world to be, in their deliberations by meditations of hope. As to those who are drunk with wine, various hallucinations present themselves, so he who is drunk and is ablaze does not know trouble, nor the world, nor anything in it. These things happen to those who are simple of heart and fervent with hope. And many things which will happen unto those who go the traditional course of behavior after long labors of purification are tasted by them in the beginning of the way, by faith of soul only. All that the Lord wills, he does. Blessed are those who, in the sea of troubles, keep themselves simple, and avoid investigation, in fervor to God, without turning their back, for they will quickly be safe in the harbor of the promises and rest in the mansions attained by all who labor well. There they are consoled for their toiling, exulting with the joy of their hope. Those who proceed with hope are not liable to see the injuries on the way, neither are they able to investigate the like. But when they have gone ashore, they appear unto them, and they praise God, thinking how they have been guarded amidst all those storms and the many cliffs of which they were unconscious, because they are not anxious to look at such things. But those who cherish serious thoughts and wish to deal very prudently and give themselves up to evolving deliberations, and to bear and make many preparations, and wish to see and to deliberate the causes of injuries and thoughts of relaxation, such are usually constantly found at the door of their houses. For the slothful man saith, "There is a lion without, I shall be slain in the streets." And as those who said, "And there we saw the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers." And the cities are strong and walled up to heaven. These are the people who at the time of death are found at the beginning of their way. They are those who constantly wish to act prudently, but never to begin. But the simple swims and passes with his first ardor. He does not think of the body, nor of the possibility that his commerce will not prosper. Let not the greatness of thy wisdom be a stumbling block for thyself and a snare before thee, preventing thee from beginning manly and quickly, in the hope in God, thy course cleansed with blood, lest thou be constantly needy and devoid of the knowledge of God. He who looks at the winds will not sow. Better for us is death in the war for the sake of God than a life of shame and baseness. If thou wilt begin with one of the works of God, make thy testament beforehand, as one who has no further life in this world, and as one prepared for death. Draw near to it without hope, as one whose end will be reached in that action, and as if it will be the end of thy days, without thy seeing any more. Let this be truly decided in thy mind, lest victory be taken from thee through hope of life being a cause of spiritual laxity. Therefore let not wisdom reign wholly over thy actions. Give quickly room also to faith in thy spirit. Remember constantly the days after death, and let laxity never enter thy soul, according to the word of the sage who has said, 1,000 years in this world are not like one in the world of the righteous. Begin manly with every work of excellence. Do not approach it with a double heart. Do not doubt in thy heart on the way of thy course, of the hope of God's grace, lest thy toiling become in vain and the work of thy service become heavy for thee. But believe in thy heart that God is merciful and gives grace to those who seek him, not in accordance with our service, but in accordance with the love of our soul and with our faith in him. For as thou hast believed, so it will happen unto thee. Some are occupied by knocking their head the whole day instead of by their services, and with some, perpetual kneelings take the place of the number of their prayers. Some are occupied by the course of their tears instead of by their canonical duties, without seeking anything besides, because it is better to them than all other things. Some fulfill the laws prescribed to them by their zeal for their spiritual meditations, by their suffering from hunger which eats away their flesh. Some are withheld from accomplishing their work by the torments which torture their stomach. Some do not make a break in their reciting of psalms on account of their spiritual fervor. The heart of some is set aflame by written words. Some are captivated by the understanding thereof. And there are some whose lips are withheld from their ordinary course by the stupor caused by the contents of their recitation. Some taste all these things and are satisfied, and turn away and desist. Some taste a little from them only, and become puffed up and insolent and forget. Some are held back from them by the severe suffering from their plagues, some by all kinds of allurements, some by power, some by glory among men, others by passion for worldly things, some by wanton occupations. Some, however, advance well, and make up their mind. They do not turn their back before they have taken possession of the pearl. Begin every work for the sake of God joyfully, and if thou art pure from affections and from doubt of heart, God will remunerate thee and help thee and give thee wisdom, and according to his will and in a wonderful way, he will bring thee to perfection. To whom be glory and power and adoration and exaltation forever and ever. Amen. Completed are the 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence. End of Treatise 6. End of Mystic Treatises, 6 treatises on the behavior of excellence, by Isaac of Nineveh, translated by Arent Jan Wensinkt.